Greetings and welcome to a special Sunday edition of House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, or this afternoon, we are pleased to present our National Grand Sheik, Tarik Bey, as he gives us a rundown on defunding the gangs of New York and their race paradigm program. Welcome, Grand Sheik.
Islam. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Vada alaikum. Subject matter for tonight. Defunding the gangs of New York and the race paradigm weapon system, actually. There's so much that we can go into, and there's so many reference points that most people need to put these things in perspective, all of which we cannot go over like in one lecture. And any one of these subdivisional subject matters can take up actually hours of actually study. So I'm going to give you some reference points that I would suggest that you read on your own so that what we're going to talk about tonight can be put in perspective. I want to start off by saying this. The perspective that is given in the constructive history, or what is known as Reconstructed History, in relationship to the early 19th century operations in New Amsterdam, in Amsterdam actually, which is called New York now, etc., is usually given from the perspective of the hybrid Europeans battling with each other for jobs and positions in society, etc., being immigrants coming to Morocco, which generally is referred to as America, etc. However, the scholars know that the concepts that are given are totally misdirected, and for the most part, one-sided, and also to create a narrative that's circumstantial of hybrid Europeans competing with each other without telling the real truth that they were actually imposing the continued paradigm of colonization and stealing the land from the Moors, the Aboriginal peoples of the land, who have been tagged Negro, Black, Colored, and Indian, etc. So some of these things that we're going to hit on so that you can do some research for yourself to put these things in perspective. Now, these things need to be grounded in your basic reference point base to understand a lot of the politics operating at North America. Number one, the Spanish Inquisition must be comprehended as operative at and on the lands of North America, particularly, and then exported around the globe, although the most immediate areas would be South Amexem, known as South America, Central Amexem, known as Central America, etc., and the islands, etc. So look at these things and do research on the Organic Act of Congress, 1871. That's important because you have to put in perspective motive. Most of what we're going to be talking about is actual and real motive of operations, distinguished from the party line, storyline that has been told about the gangs of New York in the early 19th century, and with the hybrid people of Irish and the hybrids of Italia and others coming to North America, etc. And keep in mind, this must be recognized in your mind, and you must keep this in perspective at all times. They are immigrants, they're not Americans. Get that through your head. Because one of the things that they've been misrepresenting in the history is claiming to be Americans. This diverts people from the actual operations that were taking place, and that is colonial operations and them stealing and cribbing the land under the Pope's operations of the doctrine of discovery. And so they emphasize the hybrid Europeans battling with each other for jobs and positions, etc., in the swamplands of Amsterdam, which is called now New York, because they changed the maps too. You got to know that. And many of the Aboriginal people who were in the area, they were running out, and so they really turn the history around and refer to the Aboriginal people as slaves, when actually it's reverse. Slave is actually derived from Slovakian, and it actually deals with the hybrid Europeans, or what is known as the Paleolith of the species of hybrid Europeans. The other thing that you need to look at is St. Patrick's Day that they celebrate in Ireland. And St. Patrick's Day has relationship to actually them killing off the Picts, the Dubs, and the Mores, who are the true Europeans, which is Moors, etc. And in doing so, their celebration is called St. Patrick's Day. Amongst Africans, it's known as Tag Day. For the people who are looking at the gangs of New York, their operations past and present, and also the race paradigm as a weapon, you need to be grounded in one of the hybrid German naturalists, taxidermist known as Carl Linnaeus. And you're dealing around 1735, and he's dealing with works of actually a couple of other German naturalists before himself. However, he dealt with constructing the view of what is known as the phenotypes of humanity to divide the human family, mainly because they were in the process of claiming to be Americans. And it also comes from the pattern of a lot of the hybrid Europeans claiming to be Jews while they're not Jews, which is a makeup or a cover up of the Sabian Moors culture, or the Gnostic culture of Hermetic law and Hermetic culture, which you know as Sabbath or Sabbath, etc. And of course, the seven. All of this goes back to, say, Nubia, Sudan, Eritrea, collectively Phoenicia, Egypt. So when you're talking Phoenicians and Egypt, you're simply talking the Asiatic African culture collectively, actually, and not so much as the geographical or jurisdictional lines that have been presented to the world in the Mappa Mundi operations of reconstructed history and constructed history that the people get. And so what you have essentially that has been going on the planet is the hybrid Europeans writing themselves into history of Asia and Africa, and then trying to separate the Asians and Africans from their Hikupta origin history, etc. Hikupta, you would be known as Egypt. So they're trying to separate mentally you from Egypt, etc., which is also here. So this has necessitated them reconstructing history. And it on the surface, most people would think, so what does the gangs of New York have to do with that? You know, what you have actually as the gangs of New York, and this must be very, very clear to you, that the hybrid Europeans that that were notoriously known as the gangs of New York, and they have multiple gangs, etc., were hired actually by the United States Corporation Trading Company, which was also in, the owners were also in the process of reconstructing history to promote their corporation as a country, which is the concept that most people have now. So there's a concept of people not really understanding that the United States is not a country, just like the hybrid Europeans are not Americans. Same thing. And just like the hybrid Europeans claim to be Jews are not Jews. The same paradigm is there. Now, the concept that the people have is that the gangs of New York are unfortunate, poor European hybrid Paleoliths who come to America that are struggling. Some of that is true, yes. However, what they're not telling the people is that many of them came only under the auspices of trading, of trade routes, and many of them would be sponsored with jobs, etc., to come to North America, because trading has always been going between Asia and the Maghreb, which is actually Morocco, which is North America, for actually centuries. And so many of them are actually indentured, have indentured contracts, whereas they would pay for their travels because they actually had nothing. And so a lot of this corruption of what has become slavery has its origin in that too. And so when they're talking about slavery operating at North America, they will misrepresent it as being the Aboriginal people or people of Asiatic African descent put into servitude, when that's not exactly true. It's actually kind of like reverse. Most of your slaves were both hybrid Europeans and Pict and More Asiatics, people of the land and people of other parts of the world, etc. And many of your Asiatics who have been designated in history slaves were actually taken from North America to other parts of the world, as opposed to reverse. So even the so-called slave diaspora type thing that they've been telling you is actually a fraud, truthfully. But all of its nature is to disconnect the people from the land. This must be very, very clear. And those of you who have pens, write this down, because this is very important. The gangs of New York having a construct of hybrid Europeans who went under contract to help destabilize and wage war subtly against the Aboriginal people so they could steal New York area. This is dealing with the 5-point star, and which is the Venus star, which is also the swastika, which is ours. This must be known. This is why all of those things are giving a negative. And so they'll talk about the gangs of New York and talk about the 5 points of the streets that interjected or intersected in that area near the point of where you have now where they dropped them buildings and said that some Muslims did it with box knives from Afghanistan, and they dropped them buildings in New York, which everybody and their dog knows is a lie. But it's ongoing Inquisition war, etc. is really the 5-pointed star, which is Venus, etc., which is the star of the Moors, which is the green star in the red flag, which is also known as defrocking or pulling down the sovereignty of Morocco, or commonly known as chopping down the cherry tree. It's just that's a code word for removing the people. Now, the gangs of New York, they organized into a military commercial mercenary force. Write this down. Militarized commercial mercenary force and contractors. So the gangs of New York became contracted for the United States subdivision corporate operatives and for the governors of the different corporate states of the United States to do their dirty work of clearing the land of Moors who they tagged as blacks and Indians, etc. And much of that focus took place on Manhattan. Manhattan is now called Manhattan, and Harlem, etc. And of course, these patterns have been going on like ever since they've been here, including them bombing Tulsa, Oklahoma, bombing Columbus, Ohio, Greensville, North Carolina, etc. And the game that they have interjected into the narrative to cover this up is an adaptation from the phenotype system set up by Carlos Linnaeus of 1735. And recently, in recent decades, and around 1977 in that area, they interjected some of the code systems into the census, the US Census, I think under Title 15, to get these people to tag themselves to agree to be Negro, Black, or colored, etc., people of color, which the people don't know actually takes them out of international law protections and also out of the rule, the universal rule of descendability, because no such people exist, etc. At the same time, it removes legally, not lawfully, their obligations to the treaties and to the Constitution, because the treaties between Britain and Morocco, etc., concerning the Aboriginal people here at North America is with Moors. It's not with Negroes, Blacks, and coloreds and coons. And also coon is also a corruption of kun, etc. This has to do with Moors and Turks. There's another way of hiding Moorish history. So they say kun as a slur, which is actually kun. And that's in Asiatic African linguistic form, referencing Moors and Turks, etc., which is really still Moors. So Carlos Linnaeus, around 1735, when he used the phenotype structure, they used that to further perpetrate the caste system and also the color code system, also to disengage or to disenfranchise the people from the land and from their estates. So the gangs of New York, being mercenary or commercial mercenaries for the United States Corporation Company, whereas the governors and the mayors, etc., would send them out to neutralize resistant peoples. As an example, like say if they wanted farmland or some of the prime land areas and houses in Amsterdam, which is now called New York, they would send them out as policing, or what you call patrolling the area, looking for Moors to either kill or to steal from and to steal their property. This is why you will see all of the deed systems that are operating actually in North America and the United States are all late, very late 1800s and early 1900s. Before that, they didn't even exist in the concept that they've been presenting to the people. And so people think that the gangs of New York are men of law, when actually they were some of the most notorious criminal gangs that ever existed in any place at North America. So that organized body of hybrid European commercial mercenaries made agreements with the United States Corporation Company, and they start buying them uniforms, and they became what you know now today as the Fraternal Order of Police. And so the people who really don't know the origin of these people and have a very confused idea of what their real mission is, will often look at things that they do with sheer surprise and awe, and say, how could they do this to that little girl? How could they kill that little girl for stealing 14 cents and actually executing her? And how could they kill this innocent man that was walking down the street in his own neighborhood because some European looked at him and said they didn't like him? And how could they go all around and drown these women and take their estates and give it to the church, calling them witches? And how could they literally choke that man in the street for doing nothing, and nobody does anything? Because they're commercial mercenaries. And the people really don't understand that, because they think that they are law officers. They are not law officers. They are militarized commercial mercenaries under contract for the United States Corporation Company, the mayors and the governors of the corporate states, to destabilize targeted neighborhoods. Does it mean that every person who says they're a policeman or a policewoman is operating with that mentality? No, it does not mean that. Though most of them know that, what they're really contracted to do. And I would suggest to you to do some research and see if you ever hear any so-called Gang of New York member known as Fraternal Order of Police talk about constitutional rights of anybody. And if they do, more than likely they'll get fired, because that's not what their job is. Also, you want to do some research and recognize that all court cases in relationship to people bringing charges against so-called policemen, 90% of them fail. And it confuses the people. And the politicians and the assigned leader guys that are put in the communities are charged with arguing the Carlos Linnaeus Foundation operations, which is known as race, distinguished from nationality. I'm going to repeat: race distinguished from nationality. If you deal with nationality now, you're dealing with international law, you're dealing with treaties, and you're dealing with constitutional principles. So they disguise the truth of the rights of the people and convert them into privileges under corporate operations, which most of you already know is why they constructed, covered up the original Article of Amendment 13 with its 20 sections and interjected under a colorable operation, never ratified, no constitutional convention, constructed what is known as the 14th Amendment, also to continue the doctrine of discovery of raping the people of their land and their estates. The gangs of New York's job was to go out into the community upon assignment by the mayors and the so-called councilmen of the different corporate tax assessment programs, etc., and kill off any of the Moors, who some of whom agreed to be Indians, who were resisting or teaching the people anything relative to the real history of what was actually going on. And so their job was to make sure that whenever there was any serious issue or complaint, that they would start talking about race and skin color and not talk about nationality. And this is actually a diversion. Now, the concept that is presented to the people under the guise of the General Education Board of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates is to convince the people that the Carlos Linnaeus phenotype operations is a propagation of the truth of the origin of the human family as derived from and coming down from ancient Asia and Africa, having what would be considered a solid historical and established rule foundation, when in fact it does not. When actually it's a political construct for caste system construction. And so you look at 1735. So once you go beyond Carlos Linnaeus, the race paradigm that has been promoted around the world in these contemporary times did not exist. I repeat, before the 1735 operations of Carlos Linnaeus, the taxidermist, hybrid European German, dealing with backing up the caste system under the doctrine of discovery, because they've been stealing our land and our estates, etc. Before 1735, the race paradigm that everybody's arguing about today did not exist. Now, the concept is, as soon as they start doing their culling operations, and culling is that's C-U-L-L-I-N-G. That's sort of like a modest word to say killing off the people. Rather than say genociding the people, they'll say culling. They'll say population control or birth control. Things like that. So when you deal with Margaret Sanger, in the birth control thing, when you're dealing with Black Lives Matter operations of, say, George Soros in connection with, who's the guy that patented the coronavirus? Gates.
Gates and Fauci.
Yes. And so the people don't know that these are biological warfare tools that actually have patents on them. And to keep the people from paying attention that the people who they thought was their government is actually waging war on you, the race argument is presented to divert you from the actual operations, which is the doctrine of discovery, which the Pope of Rome had promised that they had stopped. And also the Organic Act of Congress and the set up of the Treasury bond system for the United States Corporation Company, etc., was after 1861, after they got rid of Abraham Lincoln, which it is known by all politicians, and you must write this down so you can put things in perspective. Abraham Lincoln, this is not to support him or to condemn him one way or another. It is only to tell you the truth of the history, was the last lawful president for the United States Republic platform operating under treaty and constitution. All praetors or presidents after Abraham Lincoln were operatives under the demos system of the KKK, whether they claim to be Republican or Democrat, operating and enforcing the doctrine of discovery under the Jesuit order and the Popes of Rome, with the distinct operative intent to slowly kill off the Moors, the Aboriginal people of the land, tag Negro, Black, Colored, and Indian, etc., and steal the land, and then claim the land, and then claim the sovereign power of the people by claiming to be Americans. And so when you look at the gangs of New York, one of their military operations and protocols is to patrol the streets of the Aboriginal people and systematically every once in a while do what they call a ritual sacrifice. This is where they'll kill a man or woman. 90% of the time they will be unarmed, and they will gang them just like wolves, because they're the gangs of New York, and literally murder them in front of the people to intimidate the people, to to keep that traumatic shock mentality in the people to be subdued. That's the job of the gangs of New York. So the people who you're being calling police officers, they're not officers because they're not constitutionally sanctioned. The constitutional sanction was the sheriffs. And what they've done is killed off the sheriffs and would put in members of the gangs of New York to take the job of the sheriff and make sure that the constitutions and the treaties were never acknowledged. They know them, they're obligated to take oaths, but they never enforce them. And so the gangs of New York, military operations, commercial mercenaries, pretending to be law officers whose job is to keep our communities destabilized. It does not mean, again, that all people who work for them have that intent. However, that is their charge. And when they stop doing that, also when they stop imposing what are known internationally as international foreign bills of exchange. How many of you right now, if I say to you, foreign bill of exchange, how many people would know what that actually is? Which is a feudal law, unconstitutional process, whereas a highwayman and the persons that you've been calling policemen are also known as highwaymen. Their job was to go around on the highways and the roads robbing people. And if you look at all Supreme Court cases in relationship to violations by those persons called policemen, they will also be termed as highwaymen. And that's a fact. Now, because the people don't know the real history, their concepts of how to look at these people are wrong. Their concepts of how to deal with these people are wrong. Their concepts of what they should be doing themselves within their own communities relative to treaties and constitutions have been wrong and absent. And they've been marching around, praying around, frustrating themselves and their offspring, and also out of frustration, doing things that are basically, in many instances, unlawful and not in their own interest because they have no due process, not knowing that the due process was violated when they agreed to be race or distinguished from nationality, because the nationalities come under constitutions and treaties, and race does not. It is a political paradigm that has been weaponized and is actually being enforced now. Now, with the defunding of the gangs of New York, let's say this in the first place. People look at the criminal acts of persons they've been calling police officers. They're really commercial mercenaries, so we need to call them who they really are. Murdering our people whenever they feel like it on the street, getting frustrated, and now they're talking about defunding the police departments, etc. The real deal is, and this is the fact, and it's unfortunate, it's really unfortunate, they should have never been funded in the first place. That's number one. Number two, they should not be on the streets with weapons, intimidating and murdering the people. That's number two. The sheriffs should be on the streets, and deputies should be on the streets. That's the truth. Those are the constitutionally sanctioned officers to do the jobs of keeping peace in the communities. But for the sake of disrupting the Constitution law and the treaty law and of the Moorish sovereigns who they overthrown, this is why none of these people, including these mayors and congressmen and council people and congressmen and senators, no one talks about the truth about treaties and constitution, or the truth of who the sheriff are and who are not to exercise that power. And so what you have actually operating at North America, that it has deduced to such a low denominator of justice that it's below the grade of injustice, and that these people are actually dangerous, but they always were to the people. The people are starting to discover that, and so they're talking about defunding them when they need to know that these people are not law officers. That's number one. The people should be working towards enforcing treaties and constitutions, coming into their proper person so that they can have right of claim to these things. This is the other deal. These things that have appeared to be disconnected are actually multifaceted connected. And that is the true status in full life of the people that had been removed, the misclassification of the people for the purposes of invoking feudal law, the fictional operations of deceiving the people into thinking that they can vote and that their votes are constitutional operations when they're actually not. They are actually corporate bond sanctions. They use the signatures and the claims of votes of the people, and particularly the people of the land, etc., as a sanction to create new bonds that they sell on the stock market to fund their operations. And that is absolutely the truth. The operations of the gangs of New York come down from the International Monetary Fund, which belongs to the Pope and the Jesuits. And then they force the people who are under occupation to pay a tithe, which is now called as a tax assessment, to also fund the gangs of New York, who are in turn to use to keep them under control by the council people, the de facto mayors and the de facto governors of the corporate states de facto in relationship to the de jure treaties and constitutions. That is the operations. That is the truth. And the race paradigm is a political weapon that was constructed in 1735, does not have anything to do in truth with the genetic operations and processes and civilization of humanity on earth. The truth of humanity on earth is not told because they would have to give the land back to the people. Are there any questions?
Yeah, here's one. Jafar Bey says, is Moor or Moorish a nationality and ethnicity, or just a nationality?
The ethnicity is part of the race paradigm. That's number one in the question. You know, so this there are certain words or key words that are used to create the race paradigm to take you out of the nationality. Moor is simply a short for Moroccan. The Moroccan is modern for Moabite, etc. So the Canaanites, Moabites are Moors, etc. And when you make reference to the Phoenicians, Eritreans, Nubians, Sudanese, etc., all of your different Asiatic African tribes collectively on the world, the islands in the Pacific, etc., what you call Filipinos, etc., all these are Moors, Moros. The people that you're calling Puerto Ricans are really Moroccans, Moros, Moreno, etc. The Tainos, the Caribs, Caribbeans, etc., Phoenicians, Twa, etc., they are all Moors. Get this very, very clear. So Moor is really a pedigree. So it's not an ethnic group, it's a pedigree.
Moorish, like a title or
yes,
of nobility.
Yes, yeah. It's really pedigree. Now the Bays and the Eels, Days and Owls are what are actually titles of nobility. They are actually titles to the land, etc. In relationship to the sovereigns of the land. One of the things that they had done to denationalize the Moors, as you can, as any of you who are listening can go in your ordinary dictionaries, etc. You can go in the ordinary dictionary and look up black, and the first thing you're going to see that black's an adjective, and it's derived from Middle English. Middle English is derived from Old High German. Middle English 1150, around 1150, 1500 in that area, 1150 to 1500. And it actually means pale spot. It actually means pale colors. And it's derived from Old High German. It does not mean dark melanated skin. In your connotative linguistic formats of fad construction, today they're referring to the word black as an African pedigree, which it is not, never was. It's an adjective. Now, one of the things that you can find in your dictionary, and children can find, you can send children, many of the parents don't read, but if we can get some of the children who don't have an agenda to go in the dictionary and look up black, they'll see that black is an adjective, is not a noun, and it definitely is not a pedigree. And then you'll see connotative linguistic applications of it, and people who can't read will take the race paradigm set up by Carlos Linnaeus and promote it as an African pedigree, which it is absolutely not. And then you'll see just beneath it, you'll see a compound word, blackamoor. Then they'll put it as a noun, and then they'll take the adjective and separate it from more. And then later they separate the more altogether and just call the people black. When more is the pedigree, black is an adjective, etc. And actually, when the people are promoting Black Lives Matter, what they're saying is that pale spots matter because they can't read, you know, and it's not a condemnation. It's a shameful thing because scholars know this. And many people who play into the Gates Foundation operations under George Soros don't know that the Black Lives Matter paradigm is actually to promote the race paradigm and also to promote what they have deemed for themselves race wars, which it is a weaponized system actually for degenerating, gentrifying, and disengaging the actual people from the land. They think that these people are working in their behalf. They're actually operating genocide against themselves because they can't read. They don't know that these people are actually genociding them, and they think that black means African pedigree, when actually is to denationalize them and actually take them off of the capacity of airship. They think this stuff is positive. It's actually absolutely negative. The other deal of it is that people who know don't want to go into it because most of them are compromised with 501c3 agreements and other corporate agreements, and also with their jobs. And so they also have many hybrid Europeans who are now trying to tell these people that they're Moors. And just like Trump said not long ago, the black people in North America need to really do some research and study their real history because they don't really know the real history. Now, it's not his job to tell you. So we're telling you now. And also Obama dropped a few keys on the people that undoubtedly told them who they are. But, you know, people have agendas. Many of our people have been compromised, and so they don't want to go into this area because they have, in the name of Afrocentricity, written a lot of black books. They organize a lot of quote unquote black groups and been funded by the corporations that are really behind the operations of genociding them in the first place. So there's so much corruption and compromission that inspired me actually to bring this up as a subject matter, because the people really just do not know that the Fraternal Order of Police is actually, their origin is actually the notorious gangs of Europe brought here to actually continue the doctrine of discovery, raping our people and stealing the land. And it's just that New York, being a port, a trading port, was just simply a prime area. And so the exercises or the initiation of much of the genocide and gentrification took place there. And so they to divert the people from what's really going on, as we said earlier, they'll talk about the poverty of the different hybrid European groups competing for jobs and this being a poor area, and the 5-point streets and the gangs, and they're fighting for jobs and positions, etc., to divert you from the fact that they were organized gangs to continue the doctrine of discovery under the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody's going there. Well, we are, because it's your estate and the problems that you're having right now. And it's sort of like a lot of people talking about defunding. So you know why they want to defund? Two reasons. One is that the U.S. corporation is bankrupt in the first place, and they can't fund all of those pensions and stuff that they have promised all of these gangs of New York. Really, really, really. Nations of the earth are buying U.S. Treasury bonds that they set up in 1868 after they closed the Freedmen's Bureau for these very same people that they talk about matters. But when they talk about Black Lives Matters, what they're talking about is dead status matters to the bond system. That's what they're talking about. But people can't read through it. They're thinking that it means identity. No. Why do you think you have hybrid Europeans looking like they're going to help our people the same way a lot of them people calling those fake Jews doing the civil rights marches, encouraging our people with the civil rights? You understand? Marching all, they were putting them in a hole. They were helping to rebury you. The Black Lives Matter paradigm is part of the Margaret Sanger and Gates Foundation operations for genociding our people. It ain't there to help you. And you're not Black. The Black is a tag that's put on you to take you out of treaty and constitutional platforms and heritability. But nobody's telling you that part, is it? You think they're helping you. They're not helping you. They're helping to kill you and then helping you to pay for it. They're taxing you to fund the mercenary operations that you've been calling police officers to actually kill you and to destabilize your communities. Now, that's the truth. And a lot of people who are members of that order know it and know that history of the gangs of New York, but they will not talk it because they don't want you to start examining. Because once you start examining, see who they really are, now here we have a problem. How are you going to protect your neighborhoods? Oh, keep in mind, they took your guns in violation of treaties and constitution, which you have a divine right of self-defense. And so this is why you see them always talking about removing the people's rights to bear arms when they took an oath on that constitution not to even interfere, not even to be questioned. Why? So they could carry out the doctrine of discovery and then enforce it locally through a military operations of the gangs of New York, disguised as fake sheriffs called the Fraternal Order Police. So the people are looking, oh, that's legitimate. There is no constitutional foundation for their existence whatsoever. They should have never been funded in the first place. And the sheriffs, the sheriffs, should have never been murdered off. They ain't been telling you that. They've been murdering off the sheriffs. Now you have a few sheriffs, they call them sheriffs now, around the country. They know that their numbers are weak, but if you start paying attention to a lot of the statements of some of the sheriffs around the country, you'll see them talking constitutional principles because they are the real officers. They should be funded, and the Fraternal Order of Police, who are the gangs of New York, should have never been funded in the first place. Less more defunding, but the deal of it is they're using it as a ploy to create more chaos so that people can beg for them to come in. And guess who they're going to bring in? United Nations, which belongs to the Rockefellers. And what they're going to do is really steal all the people's rights in the name of, tell me, let's look at the record. What Asiatic or African nation that the United Nations entered into as peacekeepers that ever came out with the people being sovereign or controlling their resources anymore? You've been having wars overthrown governments, poisoned water, theft of the resources, suppression of women, birth control with AIDS in it, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and Ebola and COVID-19, and then a promise of we're going to give you some vaccines, and then your children got Down syndrome, mercury in their bodies, etc. And you keep on believing that these people have your interest in heart. They're not your friends, they are your enemies. Get over it. It's the truth. It's an uncomfortable truth, yes. Horrible truth, yes. Unfair, extremely. Seriously corrupt, unmeasurably corrupt, yes. How many generations it takes for you to recognize that they don't like you? How many generations does it take you to recognize that these people are not Americans? How many generations is it going to take you, and how many generations are you going to sacrifice funding your own genocide? The subject matter is to get you to start thinking, but also to get you to start acting and start looking towards remedies. And remedies is not complaining. Remedies is not protesting. Remedies is not marching. Remedies is enforcing the Constitution and the treaties and international law and the restoration of republic order of government and removal from offices of all of these de facto persons claiming to be Americans who are not, and start talking about getting these people off your land, and for you to start reclaiming your land and reclaiming your estates and disconnecting yourself from them at every opportunity and every move. They have proven to you over and over again that they're not worthy to govern anything, that they're not honorable enough to even administer justice to a colony of roaches, less more a colony of people. They've proven to be extremely corrupt in the monetary system, so let's not even talking about their banking systems. Let's not even go to whether or not Woodrow Wilson sold out to the Jesuits with the so-called Federal Reserve, with the Jesuit orders and members of the Black Sun, etc., who've been raping you ever since, which is why you're poor now, etc. And you're looking to vote some of these people back into office to continue to do what they've been doing. It's really interesting. And then most of the time in Asiatic communities, they call policemen when some family member is acting out of order because they drank too much or something like that. 9 times out of 10, you're making a dangerous proposition because they're usually coming there with an operation with an excuse to kill them. They're mercenaries. Get over it. Now, we have a lot of work to do. Yes, we do. We have a lot of organization, serious organizing to do. Yes, we do. But we've been putting all of our energy into belief systems, putting all our funding into belief systems, and none into civic organizations that actually deal with the problems of the community. And so the people have been, for the most part, severely handicapped, incompetent to manage their affairs, and then designated unfairly and unjustly as wards of the state. And then here comes the mercenaries again to control your communities. And what do? They kill off the numbers of you every year, mostly unarmed people, to keep you in check and under the doctrine of discovery while pretending to be law officers. And then get you and your paid off leader guys to start marching around the place like fools on your own land, don't even know you're on your own land, and then start talking about race, which is an operation of Carlos Linnaeus, 1735, a war machine paradigm for instituting hybrid European hegemony operations known commonly in the modern world as white supremacy. And you're still playing the game, and you're letting them control the narrative. It's a pity. It really is. And what I've just told you, this is, you can do the research and see this stuff yourself. But people, they'll say, a lot of people say, oh, well, what is your opinion on race and stuff? If you're going to talk about race and you're not going to talk about Carlos Linnaeus, you're not talking about race. So whenever these people bring up this issue of Black Lives Matter and race game and etc., how come they never bring up Carlos Linnaeus and then tell you where this all stuff began? And that it's a weaponized social control tool. It's a weapon. It has nothing to do with the real genealogy of the human family. You want the genealogy of the human family, you better go to Asiatic Africans, not to the hybrid Europeans, better known as modern man. Duh.
This is a comment, not a question, I think.
Yeah.
Black Protestant says the original KKK has nothing to do with the Jesuits.
Kaiklos, KKK, Kaiklos is the official name for Kaiklos, which you know is the Ku Klux Klan, and you can do the research. They are the grand protectors of the Christian creed, of Niceno-Constantinopolitan creed operations, i.e. Constantine. Get over it. And if you say that has nothing to do with them, you can. The history don't prove it.
It goes way back.
It goes way back, and they've been kicking your asses for generations.
Here's a question.
It's amazing how people view things because of this misinformation.
Next one.
Sure.
Jonathan R. Williams. Since the cops are defunded, will it affect the stock market?
Duh. The stock market has been funding them. Now let's look them up. How many people do they know that the Fraternal Order of Police has stock, and that they are a for-profit religious organization? Yes, they are. And they'll say nonprofit. They're for profit. How often do they unlawfully and unconstitutionally stop someone on the street that happen to have tinted windows on what they think is their car and give them a foreign bill of exchange in violation of international law, commonly known as a ticket, to arbitrarily pay a predetermined fee to another body they're claiming to be a judge, etc., under the auspices of the state of corporation, which is another for-profit foreign corporation. And the people haven't figured out yet that these people are organized criminals. And they don't even know that the tickets that they give people on the street are actually unconstitutional in their foreign bills of exchange. I would suggest for those of you who do some reading and those of you who know law, look up foreign bill of exchange and the processes that take place, and then you determine whether they're lawful instruments or not. And this is why people who know law beat tickets, because they know that they're unlawful in the first place. People who don't know better don't know that they're being robbed by a mercenary gang known as Fraternal Order Police, who are really members of the gangs of New York who are under contract to enforce the doctrine of discovery for the popes of Rome. Go ahead.
Okay. Gregory Worthington says, what's the remedy?
The remedy is decolonization, but nobody's talking that, are they? See, the race argument is a diversion. See, it's like what needs to be done is never discussed. Why? It's considered radical. You know, it's sort of like, how many aspirins do you take when you have cancer? None. Duh. The remedy is decolonization.
The process of decolonization
is nationalization all over the planet. This is why they don't talk national. They talk race to divert you from treaties and constitutions. That's why we're in the mess we're in politically. This is what has given them the foundation of operations, is that we've been operating on de facto paradigms, false history, de facto color of law operations, and then looking for something good to come out of it, and then trying to figure out how do we fix this thing. You fix it by enforcing the law and discarding color of law, which has been operational here. This is what's been going on.
Excuse me. If a group of people can organize themselves and take over a major section of a major city like Seattle, Washington,
like that chat thing,
as they did, and it being even it was colorable.
Now,
in fact,
this is
why can't
this is what happens.
Okay,
because first let's identify that.
Okay,
in law, that's insurrection.
Right.
They can be killed because it's not law. Let's be clear.
Okay.
But
they weren't.
But now,
I mean,
that's not condemning their intent. That's not condemning their intent. I'm condemning those who back that up, who funded that.
Okay.
Their intent. The people are being used. Remember, the people generally are pawns.
Right.
There will be sacrifice, but the agenda is not what they think it is. Now, let's look at this. The implication is that they're separating themselves from the United States corporation company, right? That's the implied surface intent, right? Right? Now, what's been going on and what needs to be done? Rather than remove the culprit from office, they start destroying their own community, which is totally incorrect. Now they can be attacked. You see the point? When the issue is they should have been enforcing the Constitution and removing these people from office, and not with a vote either. It's like Thomas Jefferson said. What did Thomas Jefferson warn these people of? Also, Georgie warned them of these things. The same thing. They said, George Washington said to one woman who questioned the operation at that time, and he mentioned to the woman, he said, "Madam, you now have a republic if you're willing to keep it." Thomas Jefferson said, whenever these politicians start violating constitutional principles and make a career out of the offices of government, the wise among you will drag them literally out of the offices, line them against the fence, and shoot them. That's Thomas Jefferson, the so-called founding father, the plenipotentiary under treaty. Now, how many people talk that instead of talking that, instead of putting themselves in harm's way, taking over, being led into insurrection because they're being trapped? See, they've been trapped. What they should have been doing is enforcing the Constitution. You see, you don't need to take, if you want to take the country back, number one, you got to identify who are the people of the country and who are the people of the corporation. Because now you got a mixed breed here of confusion, of claimants that have no claim, that are actually inciting what? Insurrection under the guise of trying to be constitutional. You better study this stuff very carefully because you're being set up.
Here's a question.
They are being set up, and it's shameful, and it's really upsetting, because you know who's going to get blamed for all this? Our people in their communities. And guess whose communities are destroyed? It ain't suburbia. It ain't the corporations. It's your daggone communities and the stores, half of them, which is the last breed or the last tail ends of the stores that some of your own people have. Duh.
Question, Foxy Bill. If they decide to start forced vaccines under public safety, will that suspend all Constitution rights? And
well, they've been suspending them in the first place.
And I guess, will it be forced jurisdiction?
They've already forced jurisdiction. That's what is going on in the first place. That's what all this stuff is happening. The de facto operations, let's look at this. Organic Act of Congress, 1871. By law, I challenge any politician operating on the land at North America to come forth and tell the people the truth about the Organic Act of Congress 1871, and then tell the people that they are lawful constitutional officers. And they won't do it, because if they did, they'd be lying. So now you got a bunch of criminals running everything, pretending to be government and doing things to you, and then charging you for it. That's what's going on. That's actually what's going on. There's no reason I chose this subject. And it's being enforced by the gangs of New York under the guise of law. And the diversion of it all is race argument that removes you off of the international law of protections of treaties and constitutions, which is what your conversation should be about, and decolonization. Let's give another example so that people can kind of look at this more rationally. These same people here, these congressmen and senators who are sons and daughters, mostly, of congressmen and congresswomen who superseded them in those locked-in family jobs of de facto government, were raping little boys and girls under their usual doctrine of discovery in Isabela, in Cuba, etc. Now, for some of you who have a little bit of history, and I'm not defending Fidel Castro because he's part of the game too, to some degree. However, Fidel Castro nationalized Cuba and told those Paleolithic Europeans to take their butts and get off the island. That's called nationalization. Well, guess what you got to do with these colonists here who have been pretending to be Americans and they're not? You got to tell the real history so the people can get their heads clear and start decolonizing. You got to nationalize in order to protect the people. If you're talking anything else realistically, you're not trying to solve the problem. And I know that this thing is monstrously big. I know it's monstrously entrenched. However, that's the cure. If you don't want the cure, don't talk about the cure. If you want this confusion to keep on going on, you keep this mess up. Not only that, they're going to be killing you off anyway so that you can't fight back anyway. Because that's what they've been doing. And I don't know what it takes to make these people recognize that these people are waging war on you. And it ain't China and it ain't Russia. It's these people here, fake hybrid Europeans claiming to be Americans who are not Americans, enforced by the military operations of the gangs of New York called Fraternal Order of Police. Now that's the truth. Get over it. I know it's hard, but you're going to have to, if we're really going to be honest and start trying to solve problems here on this land, this is the subject matter, and you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to face this monster. You have to face this Goliath and do whatever is necessary. Go into your divine mind, the divine mind of your ancestors. Bring up the best that you got. Put the best men and women forth with the best minds and come together, enforcing international law and constitutions and treaties, even though they ain't been acting right on those platforms either. But that's the platforms that you should be talking about. And the major subject should be decolonization. And if you're not talking decolonization, you're not trying to solve the problem, because your problem is occupational colonization. That's what it is. Get over it. And the genocide will continue until you decolonize the land. And the universal international term for decolonization is called nationalization. And so now you got to identify the true Americans and distinguish them from the fake corporate Americans who've been pretending to be Americans and raping the people on the land and killing them off. That's what's been going on. You don't need to march. You need to enforce the law.
Yes. Jory Workin said some celebrities secretly claim their nationality, and then someone else said, why should I saw nationality. Okay. Harold Sanders said, why should your nationality be secret? And I think you can address that because you know some.
You already know.
I know.
You already know half of our people who like to be call themselves Negroites have betrayed their own and will try to ruin the careers of anyone who starts telling the truth because put it this way, it's sort of like when people start trying to clean things up, it makes people who have been consciously dirty conscious of themselves, and they don't like it. It's sort of like, oh, you want to get out of the doo-doo pool, huh? Oh, you want to take a bath, huh? Oh, you want to get the leeches off, huh? Oh, what you trying to do, make us look bad? That's the attitude they have to deal with. You already know what happened to, like I talk to him very often. He calls me every once in a while, Most Def as an example, right? Most Def, you already know he's a bae. You already know Wesley Snipes is conscious. You know Michael Jackson got conscious. You know Janet is conscious. I think Jermaine is. I haven't talked to him, but I talked to Mike and I talked to Jan indirectly, but I talked to Q for Mike on a regular basis for years. And this has much to do when he started finding out what was going on, even with the fake contracts, and then he started calling them fake Jews devils, and of course you already know what they did to him. And that wasn't an accident. Don't think it ever was. Same thing with Prince when he got back control of his music, and as a matter of fact, he started dropping some of the history and telling the people, and y'all can do some of this research, when he started dropping little keys talking about, guess what? George Washington really wasn't the first president. He was the ninth. They already knew that he was conscious. They already knew he knew what was up. Then all of a sudden, they made sure he couldn't even use his own name. Then he started finding out about contract law. Or then in order for his career not to be totally destroyed, he had to do private contracts where he sold some of his music, I think, through Best Buy or a few other places, and other places couldn't sell his music, etc., because they was robbing him to death. And then Whitney, she would start getting control of her music. All of a sudden, she drowned. Then a few other people found out what was up. Then they drowned their daughter. These people,
Mariah Carey,
same thing. Mariah, is conscious,
yeah.
And Nick Cannon's conscious.
Yeah.
They try to screw them too. You know what I mean? But Nick is kind of more. He's more grounded. He knows more. Mm-hmm. Even though he considers himself a student, Nick is really on it. He understands it. He already knows that it's a game, and he's willing to tell if you get the point. But for the most part, Stevie Wonder's conscious. A lot of them is conscious. My friend, they used to live, as a matter of fact, his family lived around from my family. James Ingram, conscious. Peebo Bryson is conscious. A lot of them is conscious. But you already know how our people are thinking that they're Constantinians. The first thing is, oh, you don't believe in Jesus sandwiches and stuff. And they start that stuff because they really following Rome under the guise of Jesus. You got to understand, our people ain't necessarily the nicest people in the world either.
Right.
You want to find some perfected hypocrites, it's among our own. So they've been dangerous to our own. As an example, even with Marcus Garvey, when he was talking about international trade with Africa, right? They started lying on him and saying that he was talking about taking our people from here, going to that side of Africa, when he was talking about Pan-African trade, etc. And as a matter of fact, the photographer, his right-hand man was actually a CIA man. Same thing operating with 32-degree Mason, what's his name? Martin Luther King. His right-hand man was CIA man. His photographer. Stop. Everybody knows what this is. As soon as them French Muslim school Malcolm, that the Maghreb was actually the land, not Evening Salat. If you left home, don't come in with this black and white language, that's slave language. Of course, you already know when he wouldn't take the payoff, the good brothers helped the hybrid Europeans due to their good brother, Il Malik. Yeah, please. So you knew the answer when you asked that question.
Here's another question. Lachelle Davis says, Grand Sheik Taj, we have the MSTA, NFAC, RPG, and the NOI. Where is our common ground to begin operations?
Now, that is called Constitution and Treaty Operations. Now, for those of you who will do the research on the NOI, you'll recognize that every once in a while, Farrakhan will throw a seed out there to the people and tell them that they're Moors. He's giving signals, but we've got to start reaching out to each other and organizing. The key is we got to go back to Constitution and treaty operations. And we've got to stop the factionalism and start looking at, the concepts of religion from their anthropomorphic view and take them back to their Sabian or Saba foundation from which all of it comes, and that will cause or bring the unity as far as philosophy is concerned. And as a matter of fact, the German operations of the hybrid Europeans, they even set up a system that they call, and Abdullah was talking about it today, hermeneutics. Yeah. Now that's the system of how they train people to interpret Bible, Quran, different books like that, etc. But in the word itself, it's telling you what they're doing. Hermetic law is Moorish science. Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes is Tahuti. See, so the people don't know these connections. They keep on going off in these little club games, schismed against each other. When if they go to the root, they find out they lost their root. That's what it is. In other words, they've been denationalized. Because your nationalization is also the customs and the traditions, not just the attributes that you've been calling names. Our concept of what nationalization is totally incorrect. It's also a restoration of the culture and the traditions. And guess what you will find? As an example, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would always tell the brothers and sisters in the FOI and the MGT, says, in reference to the studies, he would say the supreme wisdom will be handed you later. Why was he saying that? He was saying that because it is absolutely true. It means that the Saba or the Sabian culture that is really at the base of this will be handed you later after you've groomed yourself coming out of that mentality, of that Negroite mentality. And then you will get what you would call supreme wisdom, and then go into what you would call your Adam degrees. Of course, he never got a chance to do that, did he? Because that was infiltrated just like the Moorish Science Temple was infiltrated. J. Edgar Hoover. All you got to do is look at the FBI papers, and you'll see what's happening. You'll see why many people in these organizations don't promote civics deliberately and not accidentally. And you'll see that many of the people who know that Noble Drawley's registered the Moorish Temple of Science as a civic organization, and you'll see many people who claim to follow the instructions laid down by the prophet will never talk about that or never get into details about that. They'll just talk dogmatic religion. Yeah, and here we go. And here we go. All this BS still going on because no one will address the real civic matters, the matters of civilization, and the usurpation of the Republic Order of the Constitution, i.e., which is the supreme law of the land via the treaties and the Constitution. That's the truth.
I'm waiting for another question or comment.
Go ahead.
Daryl Sadler says, it takes big bucks, dollar signs, and resources to quote unquote decolonize anywhere. You will be on your own completely. Can you afford it?
Oh, cool. Good. And I understand that. Then we say it's a big monster. Now, this is what your choice is. Your choice is to start decolonizing and talking about this matter honestly, or be prepared to die. Because that's what's going to happen. Because that's what they're going to do. They're genociding these people off. Now, if that's your choice, you have a right. Then the deal of it is what's coming on this planet is that not unlike what he's saying and implying, which is actually a reality, right? It is a cruel reality. But you know what makes it uncomfortable? Because when you look at it, everybody has to admit, and they don't want to really admit it, that when you look at this honestly, you're admitting that they're waging war on the people. And it ain't some outside foreigners. It's these people who you've been calling your government and who are not your government. That's your problem. Now, meanwhile, these same people that have been going in the Army, Navy, and Marines, going around the world, helping these hybrid, foreign, fake Americans war against their own people, but they won't stand up for truth here on their own land. And they'd rather bend over and be the hypocrite than to tell the truth because it's uncomfortable and it's ugly and it's big. Yes, we agree that Frankenstein, he grew up a little bit. Yes, Frankenstein is really acting like a real asshole. Yes, however, you had to burn Frankenstein up one way or another because Frankie's going to kill you. Now, you make up your mind how you're going to handle this stuff, what you're going to do about it, and you got to be realistic. And the real deal of it is, the things that should have been going on is treaty enforcement, constitution enforcement, and the platform on which that is done internationally is called a consular platform of international communications, law enforcement, and restoration of estates. Now, the Pope of Rome, Pope Francis, touched on these things with his letter to Obama, which many of you have, that letter, Civil Orders. And for some of you who are listening, go on the internet because it's public information. It's not even hidden. Civil Orders letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, and read it. Pay attention to the 4 different spellings of the United States, and pay attention to the section where he goes into estates, and pay attention to how it ends when he talks about this corruption that we're dealing with today has to do with them, instead of freeing, i.e. Africans, etc., they enslaved us and created bonds on us. And that's the corruption that they've been dealing with today, and that they were going to end all of that. And as a matter of fact, they had an international meeting when the Pope did the motu proprio in around 2013. That's when the United States Corporation went bankrupt again, and he told them not to continue. And they had so-called religious leaders from around the world and political and civic leaders from around the world, and they have a meeting. And they promised to end the doctrine of discovery, which is what we're talking about now, which means they were defunding the mercenary operations, which would include the police. However, if you're going to defund the corruption, you have to install legitimate operations, don't you? So now if you want to defund the corruption, ain't nobody talking about reinstituting the sheriffs, are they? Why? Because you have to go back to fatwa, which is Moore's law. You this the whole point. And you hear, and a lot of Europeans, hybrid Europeans, know that. That's why you start seeing them talking about, oh man, they're gonna bring Sharia law back to America and stuff. What they really mean is they're gonna enforce that Constitution because it came from Muslim law. Obama told you that. It's not a secret. But how many people out there listening even know that the Constitution came from Muslim law, from the Honesty Confederation that already exists? Those are Moors. They just called some of us Indians in agreements because some of them are Naga. Hey, and Dravid. Hey, that's like the truth. How come they won't say that? How come some of these people who $5 Indians, who keep saying they $5 Indians, will tell you about the Naga and Dravid? They won't say that they Dravid, will they? Please, because they ain't.
Would that be the Dravidians?
Yes. And they daggone sure ain't the Paleolithic Europeans that wearing ponytails and beads claim to be Indians, beating drums. The fraud has to end. That's really, we've been living a fraud on so many levels. This is why there's confusion. And the deal of it is it's all crashing. That's what's happening. And not everybody. So many people want to fix this thing, but they're operating from a false platform and a false paradigm to try to fix something. You got to get rid of the false paradigm. You got to identify who's who, and you got to get the fake Americans out of here. And that's the truth. And then you got to stop the mercenary operations of the gangs of New York, who have been pretending since the 19th century to be peacekeepers when actually they're mercenary officers. They're not mercenary officers. They're mercenary policy, doctrine of discovery policy enforcers. That's what they are. And you've been calling them police officers. They've been calling themselves that. However, the doctrine of discovery enforcers, that's what they are. And it's unfortunate. And then they pay a few indigenous people, give them jobs to, to help hurt their own people to make this thing kind of look kind of legitimate. It's still a fraud. It's unfortunate, but it's still a fraud. Big fraud, yes. Monstrous fraud, yes. Extremely corrupt, absolutely. So now you got to bring out all your spirituality that you've claimed to have and start fixing things, don't you? Don't we? Yes, we do. Is there anything else?
Oh, I'm sure that there. So let me see. I'm just trying to find. Okay. Let me look. Okay, we put this up. Kevin Anderson, we have a group of investors in the process of developing our own community and purchasing land. If we establish our own bylaws and claimed our nationalities, would we be separated from the U.S. court?
You've already been separated from the U.S. court. You was never a part of it. Your only connection with the U.S. corporation is through the bond system on Wall Street. You're not citizens of that foreign corporation. It is a foreign corporate entity. Do you happen to have a print off of the House Joint Resolution 192 or the Pope's letter to Obama?
I don't think so, but I can probably bring it up on my phone.
Anyway, for those of you, some of you who have been study House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June the 5th of 1933, and you'll see how the birth certificates were used as bonds to back the United States corporation debt, which is not a country, it's a foreign corporation. If you're looking, if for those of you who are reading the letter from Pope Francis to Barack Obama, you'll see the Pope will tell you that the United States is not a country. It is a corporation belonging to the Crown. The Crown is run from Fleet Street, England, which we have told you all for years. I.e., this is why they hide original Article Amendment Nobility Clause of Article Amendment 13 with its 20 sections. Because there's not supposed to be any lawyers holding any offices under the legitimate United States. How many of your congressmen, they ain't yours though, those persons claim to be congressmen and senators are lawyers. So why do you think you're getting screwed? Because the feudal operations are operating currently as government, not the government, as government.
You want me to bring it up?
Go ahead.
Let me see. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to bring, let me see the application.
You know, in the same way we tell people to read the philosophy page of Frederick T. Gates and John D. Rockefeller for the General Education Board, they wouldn't be complaining about the education that their children aren't getting because they would know that they're already being set up. They don't even hide it because the parents won't even read. So what chance do the children have?
So I have a page up that says, what is HJR 192? Can we discharge our debts to the government?
You don't discharge your debts to the government. This is another fraud that they had perpetrated against us, is that the debt is already discharged. And it don't belong to you, it belongs to them. You see, that's where the whole fraud is. You see how the fraud continues? When the people find out the truth about the corruption of these operations, they keep attaching themselves to the debt, and they're not the debtor. They're actually, it's against your estate. You're actually the creditors. You're the nationals of the land. They made the bonds against you since 1868. This is why people don't people who are even telling these people to nationalize aren't telling them the truth about what nationalization impairs. Keep telling them they're in debt. You're not in debt. The debt belongs to the United States Corporation Company. That's House Joint Resolution 192. And they're still what? Trying to transfer the debt to you. We got work to do with our people. And this is horrible because all of your so-called Black leader scholars know this. I'm not even going to name them. All these guys on the internet talking about Africa, Afrocentricity, rights and stuff, all of them know this information. Why don't they tell their people the truth and stop making their people play victim? We're so busy playing victim that we're not paying attention to the facts of what's going on. We're helping ourselves be victim and paying for it.
This is something that'll make you smile.
Good.
Khalid Wilson said, I'm naming my son Taj. Much respect to you, Elder. I have learned a lot. My wife is in labor as we speak. I had been tuning in from 2009 when you were giving lessons at the theater. So his wife is in labor. And
at the Rotunda.
He's going to name theater. His son Taj.
Oh.
Islam.
Trust.
Islam. So let me go back here. Is there any other questions? Okay, here's a question from Amenhotep. Why did the Lenape Moors assist the colonists against our Tawny Moor brothers and sisters from the British monarchy?
Now, isn't that true? Now we got to start telling some truths, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're dealing with the karmic debt of many Moors having hybrid Europeans in slavery. We're talking karmic debt, aren't we? One of the issues of bringing peace because of the wars that were taking place in Andalusia, etc., was to teach them government. And because many of the European daughters were in the harems of Moors, and many of them knew the culture, this is how the daughters of the American Revolution actually came about. Most of those women that are members of the DAR, DAR, and keep in mind, they produced a book for citizenship that is used around the world, particularly in North America. And that's a good reference point for understanding fundamental principles of citizenship classification, etc. And that comes from Moorish law. Y'all should know that. Now, what they call the Anaanasi and also Renapi. So when you're talking about the Moorish tribes here, you roll the R's. It's not Lenape, it's Renapi. Renapi, Moors, etc. Much of that was karma. And many of the high priests superseding the karmic response by actually teaching the hybrid Europeans government. So the Constitution that's adopted for the operations of trade, keep in mind that's for trade, not for them setting up a country in our land. That's for trade. The Constitution comes from Anaanasi, Confederation, Constitution principles, and the confederations that already existed, and the hybrid Europeans were brought into confederation to do trade. Almost all of these things in operations between us and the hybrids are dealing with trade, etc., including some of them becoming indentured. Now that's the fact. And also for many of you others who don't know the real history, do some in-depth research on the Whiggamore Party. And this is where the hybrid Europeans would wear curly wigs pretending to be justices, i.e., or pretending to be sovereigns, and entertaining or exercising, i.e., the sovereign powers of the Moors, learning jurisprudence from the Moors, etc. And of course, that split into the conscience Whigs and the cotton Whigs, etc. And there you have the battles between them, and out of that evolved their Democratic and Republican Party, imitating Moorish law. It's still your stuff.
Jasmine Daniel said, we absolutely need to connect on a metaphysical and spiritual in the quantum reality to allow our collective minds to manifest the future we desire.
And that is true, because we are creators and makers of our own. Now let's go back to this and in support of what she's saying.
I agree.
This is why it's important for people to go back to more science, which is actually Hermetic law, so that your concept of mind, see, because the reference points that our people are using in the name of spirituality are corrupted. And so when they try to go, they're usually going into Afro-Asiatic culture with a corrupted anthropomorphic perspective. And so therefore they still don't meet because they're corrupted. The other deal is the patriotization of all the God systems and the misrepresentation of the God systems. The people don't even know that the God systems are transit, or what you call transitive verb action, latent action activities of the development of the body, and not a being outside yourself. So to even be into the spirit principle, they even have to learn the breathing techniques, which is really the spiritual techniques. And then the Hermetic philosophies, which is really the religion and the cosmology. And if that's not brought back to the people, they will battle each other by design, because most of them are approaching this, and you know this to be true, from the dogma systems taught to them by the hybrids who took over. That's the truth. Get over it. And we got to fix that. It's not that it's not fixable. It's that people don't want to tell the truth, because they got to dump all their idol God systems that they've adopted. And rather than tell the truth, they be the hypocrites and then try to fix things. It can't work that way.
Jordan Cellfood asked, was the U.S. flag is created by the Moors?
Say it again.
Is the U.S. flag created, or was it created by the Moors?
It's a trading banner, and still that comes from us too, and them. Actually, that's a trade. You got your 7 red stripes. Your 7 red stripes that represent Saba. All right. And your red, white, and blue actually represents the colors of the dog star, etc., which is our guide star, etc., and the convergence of the constellations. So that doesn't, in fact, really even belong to the hybrids anyway, but we're allowing that. The real flags that should be operating when that is flying is the continental flag. That is the red flag with the white canton with the cedar tree in the corner. And then you've got the national flag, which is the red flag with the 5-pointed green star of Venus in it, or Freya, etc. And those 3 flags are supposed to be flying together when they're trading and operating. And that Stars and Stripe is not the national flag. It's a trading banner for commerce. Not to be rejected, to be understood.
Okay. Jeremy L. Malik Bey says, it seems to me that we can charge our Moorish brothers and sisters that work for the bar and these unlawful gangs for treason.
Sure you can. Because number one, the bar, they're holding their allegiances to the Circle Church and the Chancery on Fleet Street, England, who's beholding to the Jesuit order and to the Pope of Rome, and not to the order of the honor of anything allodial whatsoever relative to the rights of the people. And with the missionary operations to subvert treaties and constitutions. In fact, that's why, by law, they were not to hold any office under the Republic, United States, distinguished from the democracy operations of the Klan. And then you have some members of the Ku Klux Klan that are actually dedicated to enforcing Constitution principle and are not negative at all the way that people think. It's just that they've been infiltrated and corrupted too. So our concepts about a lot of things have been so corrupted that we got to get back to fundamental truths to start fixing this stuff. But for the most part, it's like a cruel, hard lesson for everybody now. We got a lot of things to dump. We really do. A lot of things to dump. And the deal of it is, because the dark priesthood has been so desperate and so willing to start openly murdering the people off, the people really have to start taking this stuff serious, like seriously serious. Because by the time some of these people decide that they want to start really getting serious about helping to fix this thing and about nationalizing this stuff to start fixing the issue of the states and everything, this man is trying to kill them off before that happens. And he's not joking. And this is what makes it really, really dangerous and a bad time for our people, because while they've been messing around, looking at this information here and there, taking, twisted opinions, trying to justify whatever position there is, trying to preserve their jobs and different things, while they're thinking they're securing themselves, this man's plotting on killing them and their babies. And he ain't joking. And he's going to force vaccinations on anybody that ain't national. I guarantee you that. Because they're doing everything they can to force national law. That's why they're doing these things like this Chad and all this stuff, make it look like these people are really working for the people. No, they're trying to create an air of insurrection to justify bringing the United Nations in. And believe me, they're going to start killing these people openly then, under the guise that these people are terrorist groups, even though they're not. If you get the point, they're leading them into doing things so they can classify them and then later crash them. Oh yeah, lead them to the stink party, give them the ticket to the stink party, and then charge them with stinking. Yeah, oh yeah. That's how they do stuff. Oh, and pay attention to this. As soon as someone starts talking about these problems that are going on, and as soon as they start talking the race issue, bring up Carlos Linnaeus. And if they can't go into it, know that they're operating for the CIA and the FBI to create what you call an interjected disruption. Because that's a weaponized social engineering paradigm from Carlos Linnaeus, and introduced in the United States Corporation with the Census Bureau for misclassifying the people in order to avert their obligation to treaty and constitution enforcement, and to divert the issue of nationalizing. That's the truth. The whole race argument is used for that purpose. That is its political function. It has nothing to do with genetics and the concept that you think it does. It's a caste system construct. And also, I was shared, TT shared some information with me earlier, and this is also part of the game of the construct or the misrepresentation of Jesus as an example, where Jesus is actually Ios, which we already know Jesus is Ios, and also the Son, but Jesus is actually in its original form, Ios, actually the symbol of mother and son together, and actually Iona, etc. So it's actually a feminine principle. So now you know, and I know that is totally contrary to what they've been told in churches and mosques. However, that's origin, that's original, what I just told you. And they will deny the original in order to support the anthropomorphic presentment, in order to create confusion and hatred among the people in the name of religion. And then that schism operations is used against the people, and then they control and conquer the people. Meaning people really don't know the culture. They thought they were being told the culture. They're not really being spiritual. They're actually under mind control.
Question. CMD 1920, could you explain the Sultan of Morocco?
Would you?
I don't know what that means.
It's not complete. It's not
That's
a complete
I
question.
don't know what
It's an incomplete question.
I know.
Can't answer
They've asked it twice, but it's
Well,
still.
expand.
I don't know what they want to know.
The question's incomplete.
Yeah. Can you expound on that question about this? What do you want to know about the Sultan of Morocco?
The Sultan of Morocco, you would look at him no different, like you say, the President of the United States. It's like saying the same thing. What do you?
I don't know whether they're
It has to
asking,
be-
not unless they want to know maybe the relationship to the current Sultan of Morocco.
Oh, are they talking about?
With,
wait, so I don't know.
I'm just assuming.
Yeah,
because
no, this is what I'm saying. Are you making reference to the Sultan or the ambassador visiting North America to celebrate Noble Ali's solar return birthday, which they did a couple times? Is he referring to that? Or
I don't know that, and I don't know whether it's a he or she, but because there's another.
because
But
the
I don't know
question-
whether they're wanting to
it's
know
vague.
what that relationship
tell
is.
them to restructure because
Okay.
we're wasting time because it's vague. It's not a clear question.
This obviously is a person who's new who's saying.
I know, but it's not.
No, this is another one. Moving on.
Yeah.
Sam Banjo is saying, "What is the proper way to nationalize? Can you please answer this question this time?" So I mean,
Basically is first your consciousness, and this is true. Now, Drawley set up in the old Canaanite temple and in the Moorish temple of science process of nationalization, and that's where you're reclaiming your name and your nationality. That is preliminary. However, the expansion on it is relearning the culture, realigning yourself with treaty and constitutional principles of organized government, i.e., law, order, and governmental principles, and of course the culture. And it will take time for you to learn the culture. What we have been doing, particularly in these late years, have been concentrating on the civic area and teaching people the culture so that they wouldn't think that their pedigree is a religion, which many people have been misrepresenting their nationality as a religion, and it's created confusion. And so you have an incomplete concept. Now, so nationalization in its nature is really no different than, like, as an example, if someone has been calling your pit bull, this guy's been going around in the neighborhood calling pit bulls elephants for years. And they say, well, how do you correct this situation? You stop calling the pit bull an elephant, for starters. Pit bull is not an elephant. So get that clear, and get that clear in your head. Then put it back, classified it as a canine and not a pachyderm. Now that's real. So the deal of it is Negro, Black, and colored are in nom de guerre caste system code names, terms, not pedigree, used to denationalize the people of the land so they could enforce the doctrine of discovery, stealing the land, and at the same time, and in the same process, create schism, or called divide and conquer. So you have people of Canaanite, Moabite descent calling themselves Indians, Blacks, Negroes, Coon, people of color, colored people, Afro-Americans, which creates a schism. Now, fact, none of those terms have anything to do with any established government on the planet Earth, nor treaty, nor constitution, nor legitimate contract. Therefore, they have no claim of any estates nowhere on the planet. The people don't know that that's why that was done, to denationalize them and to defrock them and disenfranchise them from all rights, claims of estates, and the capacity at law and in law to inherit, whether corporal and incorporeal, which makes them by default wards of whatever corporate state operators are claiming jurisdiction over them.
State property.
Yes, that's what the term comes from.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the term actually is. And they actually made them think that was an Afrocentric hood term of endearment. It's a wardship claim. That means you are property of the popes of Rome. You have no right even to your own body or self, or anything that you buy or sell. This is why, under the bottomry operations of the United States corporation operators, that you're not allowed to own your cars. That's why they register them to the state, so that anytime they can take that vehicle from you and you be thinking it's yours. It's not yours. You're referred to as, pardon me, a leasee, and they can force you to get contracts of insurance with their buddies, where the congressmen and the senators have stock in the insurance companies, and when you don't give them their kickbacks, they'll send the gangs of New York on the street, stop you, say you got a contract. They won't say you got a contract with my buddy, with the private so-called Jewish, that's what they'll say, yeah, who own the insurance company that's doing human trafficking. Do you have an insurance contract with them? They won't say it that way. They say, give me your license and insurance. And when you don't, then they take your stuff and lock you up. Sometimes they shoot the people. Sometimes they kill them. Sometimes they beat them down on the street, and they take the vehicle and then they pawn it back to you with some kind
Auctions.
of, yeah. And then if you don't pawn it back, they'll auction it off and sell it. All of which is unconstitutional. But then these people don't want to deal with Constitution and treaty, do they? They want to march and pray and protest. That's what our problem is.
Here's one.
You keep getting led into what you should not be doing. That energy should have been put into enforcing Constitution and treaty in consular venues, and your community should have stayed intact. And not just that, back to the one we're talking about, they have some investors. Any trade that is done with the Federal Reserve note belongs to the Jesuits. Now, they're not telling you that, but that's true. Number two, if you're not already national and you make any transaction, it is state property from the door. Anything that is transacted under deeds and mortgages and not converted back into allodial titles or aboriginal titles or deeds by treaty, it is claimed by the state. You own nothing. You will become a tenant and you'll be treated accordingly. And then they'll tax you out of it. And then when they feel like it, by eminent domain under fake sovereignty, claiming to be white people, which they are not, they'll come and take it anyway when they feel like it. Now, that's the truth. Now, how do you solve that? Nationalize. You don't have to buy shit. Excuse my expression, not the language. Claim the land. It's yours. And adverse claim is one of the ways that it's done. But again, you need to be organized and go back to the law, because you have right to that. And these fake bankers and these fake people claim to be Jews, how they got wealthy is doing adverse claims on your land and then claiming to be somebody they're not and getting you to claim to be somebody you're not. And we keep on playing into it.
Another question.
Go ahead.
Troy D. Bay, can you speak on the nationalization process for amalgamated Moors with European mothers? Now,
this is what you must, now you got to go back to the Naturalization Act of 1790 and recognize why, the guy that came in the office after Lincoln, I apologize for not thinking of his name immediately, why they modified the Naturalization Act to 1870, because that's the platform. And see, the deal of it is those who are dealing with what you will call such status will be naturalized, distinguished from nationalized. However, the different Moorish tribes can pull them into the tribe, etc., and accept them as part of the family. Now, that's true. And it's back to the law that already exists. Remember, it's no new thing. The laws already exist. They have not been enforced. That's all.
Is that Andrew Johnson or what else?
I think Ulysses S. Grant, I think it was. Okay. I'm not sure.
Well, Johnson was right after Lincoln. So I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it is actually a naturalization.
Naturalization and national. See, the deal of it is And this is the problem that's happening all over the world. Everyone, truthfully, in order to start fixing this economic problem that they have around the world, that the Jesuits have done to the whole planet for the most part, everyone must now be truly identified. And it's sort of like in the Bible when it says, every man, every woman, every child must confess their own and worship under their own vine and fig tree. In a layman's terms, that would be called nationalize. That means you ain't got to go home, but you got to leave here. So therefore, who's who? Who is the mother's children? Who are, meaning like when they nationalized Cuba, who was allowed to stay in Cuba? Cubans. The hybrid Europeans, for all that they were stealing and claiming ownership, they had to relinquish it, didn't they? Because it wasn't their stuff. This is what's going on all over the world. Keep in mind, this is the doo-doo that's hit the fan that everybody's avoiding to talk about. This is what's happening on the planet, not just here at North America. But they're trying to hush it up by talking race and marching and protesting. That's not the problem. They're creating problems to cover up the real problem, which is decolonization.
Well, Jerry Williamson, I'm thinking I don't know if this is a statement or not, but I think it's wrong. It says is, but I mean that they mean if your father is a Moor, then you are a Moor. That's not how it works.
But you do have claim.
Well, you have claim, but you are who you're. But if your father and
in law, you're who your mother is.
Who your mother is.
Now, but now you're dealing with heritability. You're not dealing with denial of bloodline.
So when if the father is a Moor and the mother is not, then the offspring has claim.
Now
to
you
the
understand for the earlier question. Now you understand why some of the Europeans were brought into government and given a constitution and shown government. And they had allegiance to what? The treaty and the constitution. Right. And they had all the rights and privileges and protections. Problem is what they do. They overthrew the government and others infiltrated and they helped them and they overthrew the government. Now they're in trouble too. Now that's why a lot of hybrid Europeans are starting to tell the truth now, because they thought they were going to steal our state and then claim it. And they're being thrown under the bus. Now they want to talk the truth and everybody looking at them like they out to lunch. And you have people from all around the world on the islands in Philippines and etc. Now, just like Duarte in Philippines, talking about we're not Filipinos, we're Moors. Everybody's trying to claim their right now.
Because a lot of these names that people have
were given to them under colonization.
That's right.
So what is our problem? Decolonization is the issue. You see, everybody's avoiding what the problem really is.
And again, I recommend the movie. You saw the original version of Dark Crystal.
Yes, they're telling you even there.
Right. Dark Crystal, the new revised Muppet, even though it's Muppets, they did it on Netflix. What happened between the Skeksis and the Gelfins is us versus them.
It's exactly telling you the same thing.
The same thing. And it wasn't until because the Gelfins were one people with many complexions and many skills, but then
their tribes.
They had to come together.
Yes.
And they were far more than them than it was of the Skeksis that were ruling over there.
And then you see the wise woman was an astrologer.
Yes.
Just the culture.
Right. So they need to watch.
They're telling
Dark
you.
Crystal on Netflix.
They're telling you. I have the original. I remember. I'm gonna bring it to you.
Right, but when I watched, that was like about 9 episodes, and I watched the whole thing straight through, and I got it. Yeah. I'm like, this is us and them.
Now, this is what. See, but we need to get away from that. We need to start looking for the harmonies. That's why you had the treaties.
No. When I say us and them,
I'm not talking you. I'm talking people in general.
Because they had to come together.
The deal of this, it need not be this hostile thing that has come to.
Right.
It need not be the us and them concept, which is fraud and divisionism. Mm-hmm. They need to enforce the treaty and the Constitution, which is for harmony and peace. That's why I call it Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The J Treaty, the Treaty of Ghent. You know, people need to understand all these treaties are enforced. The people are learning to believe stuff or to march around the place instead of enforcing the treaties. That's the supreme law of the land. The land has become lawless. And so you have lawless people governing, claiming to be government, and that they're actually imposters. And the people keep voting for them, which is a sanction.
Seriously.
And then they wonder why.
They're in office for 40 years, and what Biden was down there when
Not only that, they're de facto.
Yeah.
See, it's not only that, they are de facto in the first instance. And the parties are de facto. And the people keep looking for a cure in them. They're the problem. And the people looking to them for the cure. And it's sort of like, they perfected the old story of the Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. They perfected the Trojan horse. They gifted you with the Democratic and Republican Party, and they're both de facto. And the fight that they're having with each other, they're battling each other for power over your estate.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I tell people when I talk about different things that Trump is doing, I remind them so they don't get this twisted. I'm not defending Trump. I'm just telling the truth. They're playing good cop, bad cop. Trump is the good cop. Get over it. But it don't mean they ain't fighting over your estate, because they are.
Okay.
And you need to stop marching, stop praying, and stop all these belief clubs and start putting all your energy in restoring civilization. And that will be done through civic organizations. And now that's the truth. Now, for those of you who keep claiming this deep spirituality, how many of these so-called spiritual houses you got in all your communities on every other corner? Then write down fact of the history of the record of their successes and justify their existence. And the fact of the matter is you can't without lying, which means they have been misrepresented too. Now that's a fact.
So Dre Workin says, ask if a Nigerian is Moor.
Yes, they're Moors. Ask them just directly. They'll tell you.
Well, you ask them the question.
Sure they are.
Or are they Moabites from the?
Sure, they're Moabite and Canaanites. Yes, most of your people in say the Carib Moors is Niger. Yes, they are. They Banti. Many of these up here are what? Phoenicians. They are Banti. All of us are. We're all Berber, we're all Red Sea people. Get over it. See, the misconcept that people have, they keep on looking at modern Mapamundi and separating North America from Asia, from Africa, when we're one. We're the same people, different tribes, multiple tribes. As an example, so let's look at this, what they know. So you look at in Nigeria, right? You've got over 500 languages. So what does that tell you?
There's a lot of
about 500 language dialects. Amongst the Moors, you've got 7 or 8 dialects of Arabic. Latin, multiple dialects. And German, all that can be traced back to Sanskrit, that can be traced back to Nubia and Sudan. So even Germanic languages, or what you call English, is really African. Our people's concepts are wrong because they don't know the real history. They don't know language groups. They don't know language families. Because that's misinformation come from the hybrids who have been controlling the narrative for the last couple hundred years, and they have corrupted the entire world. Now it's gotten so confused that it's falling in on them too. So rather than start to tell the truth, they're trying to kill everybody and trying to claim the earth. This is like, it's interesting. So now you got the Not just the doctrine of discovery. You got Inter Caetera Divina, Dum Diversa Sister QV Act of 1666 that they deal all the bond systems on. And then, of course, Unum Sanctum, where they declared all of us dead. And they've been trying to steal our estates ever since. This is where the fake hybrids have been claiming to be Jews and are not Jews. They're claiming Moorish estates, claiming all your jewels, all your knowledge of the herbs, and then giving you chemicals and killing you. We need to go back. Sankofa, go back.
Go back.
Go back.
I just saw something. Just trying to find it. Oh, here's a question. Oh no, it's a statement. If you are Harvetta, a Lassiter Beck, if you're in a private trust, they cannot arrest you because you cannot be bonded. Is that a fact?
Well, that's true. Now,
they should not.
That's true to some degree. Now, this is the problem that we have, and it's good because that's how our people should be thinking. That's where they need to be going in that direction. But the deal of it is, if the being that did the trust is not in their proper person, the trust is dead. If the status is dead, the trust is dead and can be breached and will be breached. This is why we say to people, this is why Drew Ali said, if you don't do anything else, declare your nationality. Because if you don't do that, anything else you do, it's like it's a dead effort. It's almost like going out to sea with a ship whose bottom is not completed. You're guaranteed to sink. So if you're dealing in admiralty, because they're operating in admiralty and maritime law, and they're operating on the level of piracy, they're not operating on constitutional principle. You know that they're dealing in admiralty law deliberately because you're dealing with the unum sanctum operations where they're declaring the people dead at sea. So they're dealing with CEE, SEE, under the authority of the Pope, in SEA, admiralty law. And so you know that they're dealing under admiralty. Therefore, if you're sailing a vessel and your body would be considered a vessel and you're not flying your colors, i.e. your national flag, having no claim and then having no treaty to enforce an international law, they can board your ship and take all your goods and throw you overboard. Now that's the truth. And so when we're talking trust or setting up a trust or private trust, then that being who set that trust up better be in appropriate persona, because if not, it is a dead trust. And it's we really got to teach our people the truth of jurisprudence, how things work. And
well, they said if you have a private trust and it's filed in the county on the record, you don't have problems.
Let's say this: the person who filed the trust, are they national or they're in the
bay at the end of their?
Oh well, then you got a claim. How you see? So it's sort of like we've got to make sure it's clear that we're not implying to people that they can go into a nom de guerre and then file a trust that cannot be breached. That's all I'm implying. We got to make sure that that's clear, because for the trust to be live in full life, the being must be in full life. If the being is civil little mortuus and creates a trust, then the trust is civil little mortuus.
Okay.
That's law. And that's, so I want, while that statement is correct, you want to qualify by saying a being in appropriate persona has right and capacity to establish trust, private, and make claim of right of self and reversion of right of all estates, corporal and incorporeal. We must make that clear, because people think that the trust would protect them and they're in that Negro, Black, and status. No, they're not. They're state wards. They're state property.
Now, if that individual has simply corrected their status as far as, like you say, it starts in the heart, first in the mind.
You got to know yourself.
So if they've done that and they say, well, I'm no longer, Jones, Smith, Johnson.
And you make it public.
I'm okay. And I've done paperwork, may not have said it anywhere, but I got it sealed. And
you have a right. Your rights are your rights. they must be by law protected. And see, it's sort of like this. You know how it's sort of like this. You can't get into controversy and then try to change your status in the course of the argument. If it's not already established, you don't mean that you can't fix it later, but you have no right of claim.
Right.
Anything that you've done in death stays in death. In other words, anything that is done in 14th Amendment status and all nom de guerre, which is their purpose, you see the point, is dead in law. Not necessarily physically dead, but dead in the view of law. And so when you're dealing with trust, you're dealing with recognition in law process, in law recognition, in right of claim or reversion of a state claim. Therefore, that if there's a challenge, that being must be in the capacity of full life. If the being is not in capacity of full life, that being is automatically assumed under wardship. And what do? They claim all of it without having to account for the profits, which is what they've been doing. That's exactly what's been going on with the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, and the driver's licenses in the first instance. That's what our problem that exists right now actually is. And nobody wants to talk about it. Why? Because it will kill the stock market. Because the people are on the stock market. The United States is a human trafficking venue, not a country. The sooner people can get that through their head, and the gangs of New York are out there in your communities to enforce their contracts on you.
And what people don't realize is that most every place that there is a base that the United States corporation has established in these various other countries,
war and misery
and trafficking
and human trafficking,
yeah,
and pedophilia,
yeah,
and organ harvesting. None of this stuff is really hidden. It's the people, you know what it is, Dr. Naila? It is so ugly that the people really don't want to look at it. But it's folding in onto them. And they're trying to not see it, if you get the point. Mm-hmm. Or trying to figure out, let me take a pill and this disappear. It's not going to disappear. We are, this is what it is. Goliath's been going through the neighborhood kicking everybody's ass. Now he's at your door. Well, what do we do to tell Goliath not to kick our asses? You don't. You fight. Yeah, but what if you ain't got a slingshot and shit? You better find a brick. Whatever. But what you know, the deal of it is the fight's on whether you like it or not. They're fighting you whether you're fighting back or not. Your willingness to be passive has been to your detriment. And your willingness to follow these passive Negroite leaders have led us to where we are right now in this decrepit, despondent, destructive, disorderly, broken families, drug-oriented, jail-populated communities that they've been calling Blackadonia, as if it's some kind of African country.
Well, another question.
The point of it is we, the targeted people, must reject that whole paradigm and start replacing with knowledge, not with emotionalism.
Claude Bree says, why more and not indigenous? This is how we are spoke of in the play.
Indigenous is a status. They don't know. The fact that they don't even know the difference between pedigree and statuses is a problem. See, this is part of the problem. They don't know what pedigree is. They don't know what heritage is. They think that adjectives and nouns are the same part of speech. Problem. You see the problem? Mm-hmm. I know that they mean well, but that's part of the problem. They can't even read. They don't even know the rules of reading. They don't know the rules of grammar. That's third grade grammar.
Another Molly Rebecca Scott says, what would you recommend for Hawaiian natives
Hawaiian natives, they're Moors too. It's the same thing. They're claiming your stuff. They're still Moors.
Guatemalans.
They're still Moors.
These are questions coming up. That's what I'm questioning.
North, South, Central America, and the islands. Americana, all are Moors, Canaanites, Moabites. The islands, Hawaii, they're Moors. Why do you think they killed them? They got rid of the monarch, the sister. She's the monarch.
Which sister?
On Hawaii to claim it and then claim it in 51st state and crap. Please, these people, we really need to learn our history and come back together, because they're all Asiatic Africans, all of them. You either come together or these hybrid Europeans, fake Jews, are going to kill you off and then claim your estates, because that's what they're not going to do. They've been doing it. It's just that we've come to what is known as critical mass. And you finally woke up and recognized, damn, I think they're trying to kill us. Oh, yeah? How many generations you figured took? I think they're really trying to inject our children with nanoviruses and stuff. Oh, you just figured that out? Oh, my cousin's little boy got Down syndrome after they gave him shots when he was a baby. Oh, well, you just figured that out? Please. The doctrine of discovery has been in operation on this land under the Spanish Inquisition for since they've been here. 1492 is not an accidental year.
Demond Brown says, should one proclaim Moorish American nationality and do a name change on driver's license to confront race?
A license is giving up a right that already exists with you.
Travel, right? I'm putting it because
not that you wouldn't correct anything reference to you, but understand that's a corpse that's operating. You can leave that as it is because it's only a corporate entity. It's not you, never was you. Just don't do no new business in those corpse names. So not the 14th Amendment corporation, it's a corpse. It means the dead. That's exactly what it means. All 14th Amendment persons are the living dead who are used as drain pools for vampires, or what you call exploiters. And they fund the economic system not by their own intent and not by their own will, but by default of a dead status. Again, every time we look at this stuff, what's the cure? Nationalization and decolonization are the issues of the day. And they've been that for decades. It's just that our people are just they're getting tired of the pain and starting to look at things more realistically. Not enough of them, but this was really what's going on.
Okay. Sylvia Bradley says, why haven't the Moors who know all this risen up again to begin the decolonization process? Are they afraid?
Well, the decolonization is nationalization. And if they're Moor, how come they haven't been doing their job? How come they've been so busy being a traitor to the cause? Because the job is every man, every woman, every child. What makes them not responsible? What makes them not responsible? What makes you not responsible? You want everybody else to do the hard work while you sit back on your butt. That's why we're in this problem.
I mean, you're not directly.
No, it's not
in general.
We're talking in general. That's the people that take that position. They need to think what they're really admitting to. They have dishonored their mothers and fathers, and they've been part of the problem like all of us have been. And those who are willing to honor their mothers and fathers are stepping up to the plate of responsibility. It shouldn't be us by ourselves.
Q-Day Demore says you mentioned in the last lecture hasn't been a lawful court since 1789.
It hasn't been.
Can you explain a little more about that?
All right. Now, when Prince, the singer Prince, who they conveniently killed and said that he just overdosed himself because he was getting back control of his music. Same thing, Mike was getting back control of his music. Same thing, Whitney was getting back control of her music. Same thing, Luther Vandross was getting back control of his music.
Otis
Redding, Sam Cooke.
Yeah.
It goes on and on. These people don't know that these people have insurance policies on all these people under the bottomry instrument operations of the birth certificates, etc., and that they're valuable to them dead or alive, if you get the point. As an example, Michael Jackson's estate has generated more finance than it was when he was living. And guess who's stealing most of it? IRS and the rest of the club. Although finance is put aside for his children and offspring, etc., when actually nothing should be going to anyone but his offspring and his family. However, at least he was getting conscious and they bumped him off. Prince was getting conscious, they bumped him off. But anyway, back to point. Bring me back to point, because I'm going off on a tangent.
I forgot the question.
Because I get angry every time I think about this stuff.
I don't know what the question.
Every time, because these people really need to know that the United States is not a country. It's a human trafficking, trading company venue of corporations. And it's registered in Austria.
Oh, about the fact that you mentioned that there hadn't been a lawful
and
court.
The lawful courts now, George Washington, as Prince had said, because he's conscious. And I'm telling you these things so that people can start looking up these things and start putting puzzles together for themselves. George Washington was the 9th president. He's responsible for converting the Moorish Bonnevilles and estates into the states. And as a matter of fact, the cycle of them converting the Moorish estates into the corporate states wasn't completed as late as around 1810. 1910? Yeah, really late. People really don't know what's going on. And the deal of it is, when we opened up and I told everyone to look up the Organic Act of 1871, and keep in mind as the Organic Act of Congress. When was George Washington appointed to the palace? 1879. Who was president for the United States? 1871. John Hanson. More. Hold on. After 1879, everything was absolutely de facto. So there were no constitutional courts. All courts of all the states, what you would call inferior courts, Article 3, Section 1 and 2, must be assigned under the Supreme Court that holds original jurisdiction, because all jurisdictional authority is vested in one Supreme Court and any inferior court established by Congress under that Constitution. And there has not been any constitutional courts sanctioned since then. Therefore, there's been no lawful courts under the Constitution operating on the land at North America since 1789. They've all been operated by the Jesuits via the Circle Church and the Chancery, governed from Fleet Street, England, under the Bar Association, in violation of original article of Amendment 13 with its 20 sections and the nobility clause for the Constitution of the United States. And no lawyer shall hold any office of the United States under that Constitution. And they have been what? Running them private venues for profit under the Jesuit order of the Rothschilds and the Black Sun operators, and that is a fact. There's been no lawful court operating on this land since 1789.
Well, to keep stay there, Inner City News asked if you could build on John Hanson and the Great Seal of the Moorish nation.
He's the only president to use the Great Seal because that's the seal of the Canaanite Moabite nation, i.e., Respublica of Morocco. That is the Great Seal. And if you look on the back of the note, those of you who are listening, look at that note that you call a dollar bill, which is an oxymoron, which is actually a debt note and not money. And you will see under the Great Seal, it says the Great Seal. And then under the bird, it says of, which is a preposition of the United States, which is a dual seal. The only one to use that seal of the pyramid, which is the insignia of the Moorish nation, was John Hanson. No president after him ever used that seal because they're not allowed to. How's that? Because it's ours.
Ra Hudson Bay says, can you speak on the Monroe Doctrine?
The Monroe Doctrine is the principle of the acts of state, where is no state shall interfere with the sovereign operations of another state, nor set up a state within a state, etc., challenging or corrupting the jurisdictional powers of an established state, etc. And that deals in state in that term also means nations, etc. That's fundamentally the Monroe Doctrine. And keep in mind also under Monroe, because they were subverting the Moorish states here, converting them into states, they set up Liberia,
right,
and try to get some of the Moors off this side over there to justify the reconstructed history that we came from someplace else.
And Monroe,
that's Monroe. And that's why the capital of Liberia is called Monroeville.
I met a brother a few months ago in the market, farmer's market, and he said that he was from Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, he was a young brother, professional brother. And I said, you live here now? He said, yeah. I said, so you all who left here went over to Africa, to Liberia, because that's where they sent you. I said, now you're back home. And he just smiled because he didn't dispute it.
Because they know.
Anything, because they know.
It was to justify reconstructed history. And it's not that we're not the same family, it's that they were trying to justify their reconstructed history. And so do the research in the congressional records on Senator Bilbo and others, and you'll find out a lot of stuff that they ain't telling you. What the other deal, you'll recognize that a lot of your so-called black leader, black book writing guys aren't these honorable people you think they are. Talking about Black Lives Matter. That means you being in the dead 14th Amendment status matters to the stock market. That's what that means. It's not a pedigree argument. It's a birthright stealing argument. And tricking these people into thinking that they're helping them, and they're actually putting themselves under the civil little more two status. And then committing insurrection at the same time, which means they can be killed on the street legally. Oh boy, these people, and I charge a lot of these so-called who like to call themselves black scholars. I charge them because they know better. But they'll take that 501c3 skull and bones corporate kickback, corporation supports to keep that black paradigm going because it's profitable for them too. And tell the people that the word black, which is an adjective, lie to their children and tell them that it is an African identity.
Okay. Yikes.
Oh, and for those of you who are more honest, because we know that everybody that listens to it is not necessarily honest. Go to your ordinary qualified dictionary like an Oxford or Heritage Dictionary in English language and look up black and look at its etymological origin in the back of the dictionary, and you'll see that it means pale spot. And then these people will tell you it means melanin, lying their asses off.
Emmanuel Barelia asked, how do you claim nationality in the Caribbean?
Caribbean, because now let's look in the Carib. So you deal with all the Carib and look at all the names that were given to the islands in the different areas, and you will see most of them don't exist 100 years ago. So now you already know that you're Banti, Mandi, Twa. You know that you're Najir. You know that you are Phoenician. All of us are multiple tribes coming from the Red Sea. So you already know that you're Africans. So you already know collectively that you're Moors, because those are the treaties that were made for doing business here on our land with all the different nations. And you'll find multiple nations, etc. And all the treaties are with what? Morocco. You're all Moors. Get over it.
Well, now, Joel David Thompson L says, I am in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago. My great-grandmother is a Carib. How can one claim true affidavit Moorish pedigree being a Trinidad national and not lose that status?
You can still claim that's territorial jurisdiction, but you're still Moor. You can still use the treaties. It applies North, Central, South America, and even on the other side of the water. It's international. You got to get back to international principles. That's why Drew Ali said, what? Take your places among the affairs of men. He's talking international. Stop being closed-minded. That's what they've done. They've made us divide ourselves against ourselves, thinking, so look at this. Let me show you this, brother. Here you have people from Tobago, Trinidad, etc. And they'll let these fake Europeans here call themselves Americans while they're acting like they're not Americans. You see, the mental concept is corrupted. You're the American, Al-Moroccan, Al-Moroccan, Moro. Come on, get over it. Stop trying to be somebody you're not.
Here's another question. Sam Banjo says, if I use a Nigerian name instead of El Bay,
you're still right.
So still a more time.
You're still right.
Just X-Rel name, given that is European
now,
last name. Right?
This is the point. This is the point. Why, when Drew Ali started nationalizing the heirs of this estate, why do you say Moorish Americans? Because he's talking about the Moors of Al-Marak, who have been colonized by the hybrid Europeans. Brothers and sisters of the other jurisdictions still have their land areas. They have been robbed. They've been taken. The hybrid Europeans have stolen their resources, but they still have the culture. They still have the traditions, even though they've been corrupted somewhat too. They still know who they are. The ones here don't. That's the problem. Now, the other deal is that we have to come together internationally and support each other and decolonize. Now, also, look this up, good brother. 1960 era time. Decolonization. They called the Special Committee of 24. And that's where nations come together. They're supposed to be decolonizing this area anyway. How come no one talks about that? They talk about protests, Black Lives Matter. All these are diversions. They should be talking decolonization. That's the subject matter. Why do you think in Haiti, why do you think they've been doing so much stuff, bombing Haiti and calling it an earthquake? They really bombed them, actually. And they were what? They already had in the background with some of these people of these foundations operating from North America, some of these paleoliths that already had unsigned gold and jewels and treasury digging contracts that were not signed. And all of a sudden, they bombed Haiti. Now, haven't they been robbing Haiti for decades? And then when Toussaint tried to set up the Republic order again, what they do? They tortured and killed him too, got him out of the way. So let's get this very clear. These people need to get back on to understanding that we are the republic, not the hybrid Europeans. They are the democracy hybrid order of demon worship and human trafficking on bloodletting and pedophilia and organ harvesting. Human traffickers, that's who they are, pretending to be Americans. Decolonization is the subject matter. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about that the next time. We're going to talk about the Special Committee of 24. Because you all on the islands need to get your head together too. And stop letting it, and we here need to get together with you and stop this green card crap of this hybrid European he's the one who should have the green card. He's not American, you are. You get the point. You see how in other words, I'm discussing these things because if people would stop and think, they can see the corruption and that we're a part of it. We've been playing into the corruption rather than starting to correct it. We need to start correcting corruption and not sending this corruption to another generation. We start purifying our generation. Decolonization is the subject for today. Nationalization is the foundation for decolonization. It's the operative injection of the initiation of decolonization. All over the world, not just with us. We need to really get aware of what's going on, particularly with ourselves. And we need to honor our mothers and fathers. That's called nationalization. Is there anything else?
Okay. All right, Samantha. Sam Banjo is a Samantha. Okay, thank you, sister. All right. Starting stuff for now. I'm just looking to see if anyone paperwork runs military.
You know how we can all help in nationalization?
Colombia and Venezuela, are they Moors or hybrid European? Again,
they're Moors too.
Right.
If you're from the original people here, see what they've been. Most of the people on the islands have been made also. They've been interjecting, trying to make them hate themselves. So rather than admit that they're Moors, most of them are trained like rats to say, "Well, we're Africans and Indians," when both of it means that they're Moors. You see, that's so they just won't say they're Moors. It's, well, we're Afro-Indian.
And a lot of them have have these modern European fathers that came in and raped.
That's the whole, because remember, that's part of the Inquisition doctrine of discovery claim. They were injecting on the Moors so they could claim the lands. Why do you think so much emphasis is put on gender now? Because they don't want you to produce so they can claim your land.
We must say this.
That's what it's for. It's not for to help the people. It's for gentrification. Right. It is for genocide under the guise of recognizing people's rights to be lesbian or LGBTQ, to be gay, etc. When the deal over this for all people, they should be enforcing the existing human rights. It's designed to create schism and division amongst the people and to support genocide under the guise of helping people. They're not helping anyone. They're dealing with the Margaret Sanger program of gentrification and genocide and culling the people to claim your estates. And all the people that play into that don't think that they're going to give you a position. They're going to use you as pawn and then kill you off. And if you think they're not, keep playing with them.
I'm not sure if the sister is from Haiti, but she says they bombed Haiti.
Damn right they did.
What could Haiti have done other than be bombed? We have no military defense. When will you speak again? I don't know.
Well, this is the deal. Is these things need to be talked about, and we need to recognize that we're all the same people. They're our family. And we need to start coming together, all of us. We're all Almadakans. We're all Moors. We've been schismed and thinking that we're different people. The key is unity. And today, and in this day and time, the issue on the planet is, quote unquote, and you can write this down, the uniting of Asia. And Africans are Asia. Get that through your head. Stop thinking that you're different people. Stop thinking that Asiatics is just China. Asiatic is all the earth. All the earth is Sheba.
Sylvia Bradley, Grand Sheik will be back in 2 weeks. You're asking when he will speak again. If that's what you're asking, when will it be another class? It'll be 2 weeks from, well, it'll be Friday. 2 weeks from the other day, whatever date that is.
I'll say this. For those of you that have been under the mystery of the priesthood, go back to the Septuagint or your Bible and close out, as the Old Testament says, that the Son of Righteousness arises with healing in his wings. And you'll see S-U-N. Now, when we come back to the honor of our mothers and fathers, we will start to heal. And all the things that you need to know is already in you. It needs to be awakened. And that's the truth. The cure is in you. But it is in us collectively. And it's because we have agreed to follow after the idol gods of Rome, we have fallen for the schism operations of the dogmata systems of unum sanctum. That's what your problem is. Nationalization is giving all that crap back to them Romans. In common words, it's called rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But I tell you what, this land and the resources of this land ain't Caesar's. It's our estate. Let's talk about restoration of a state, reversion of a state, reclaiming of our nationality and our birthrights. And decolonization is the order of the day. That's the cure. That's the remedy.
Gabriel Alexander Carlos says, I live in Taiwan. However, I am from the U.S. When I change my nationality status, will I have issues?
You ain't changing. You claiming what you do.
Will I have issues traveling back to the States? Thank you for your time.
Now, aren't we talking international law and treaty enforcement? If we was doing that, it wouldn't have been a problem in the first place, and you wouldn't have been under there under a fraud under the U.S. corporation.
So
you see the point? That this is our problem, all of us here. And as a matter of fact, we're discussing these things now, and a lot of things that we're working on right now, and a lot of things that like Abdullah and Shem is working on, and Brother Truth is working on, and other Moors around the country that are activating the consular venue, Light, Tajiri, Sister Delilah. Many of them are trying to enforce the Constitution, getting our people back into the constitutional fold of government. That's the communication venue. As you work these problems out and start qualifying ourselves to communicate with the rest of the families of nations, and we ain't talking about the UN crap, which is really Rockefeller and Rothschild operations of actually subduing the nations, totally to the contrary, that amongst ourselves, etc. The cures will come from us because the problem came from us. In other words, we are creators and makers of our own. We allowed ourselves to get into this situation. We must use the same generation of energy that we've been using with our idol God worship and convert it into principles of civilization and bring the spirit of our ancient mothers and fathers back to this earth and fix Midgard, because we've been in trouble and we're part of the problem. First admit that we've been part of the problem and stop playing victim. Take responsibility.
David Ingram asked, isn't the blood type false, or is the blood
It's
type?
a game. All of them came from the great Moabites. So let's talk about it. And not only that, all the blood types they told you ain't all of them either.
Okay.
You got that right too. And isn't it interesting how many people to test the system that they've been trying to separate the people from the land, have sent tests to different companies and got different results. Even people who have the same mothers and fathers, and sent them to under different names, and they got different test results, which means it's a social manipulation game to remove you from the land. It's still trying to remove you from the land. And I guarantee you, if you're human, your blood type can be traced back to the Moabites, who they refer to the great African matriarch. They're trying to separate you from your mother and thus separate you from the land. Why do you think they don't talk about women? Why do you think they don't talk about all the ancient God principles are feminine? And these people keep talking about spirituality. They don't, and you yourself keep on allowing the hybrid Europeans to drive you away from your own culture and traditions. And wonder why we can't fix nothing. Can't fix nothing because you're working from a wrong and a corrupted foundation. We need to clean up our house.
I have, there's a Daryl Sadler saying quite a few bit of stuff about Jamaicans, etc., still practice witchcraft. He's talking about witchcraft.
Now, all of that
is confused.
Now, let's look at this.
Yeah, because what you call witchcraft
is not a negative.
Right.
Witch only means wise woman. So they're saying practicing wise woman craft. Everything that they've done relative to Babylonian culture and customs, they have been using, hybrid Europeans have been using the dark magic to the negative, and then putting a dark view on actually the pagan knowledge and connection to the earth. Don't confuse them and don't fall for that game. Don't learn to hate your own culture.
Well, this person is putting a lot of quotes, that a lot of Bible scriptures and stuff all through the thing. So
yes, and
it's
same
indicative
thing.
of that type of teaching.
Yes.
And me having been a pastor, I know exactly where that mentality is coming from.
Yes.
So what I just thought I would,
Yes, and now and
not,
again,
I mean, you have a right to believe what you want, but this is not.
And let's go back. Let's go
is,
back to even with them modifying the book and taking out the 7 books of Musa, etc., and also the books of magic that is in that book that they took out. And it's the same thing. Because the truth of the matter is that book is based on African culture, period.
It's a lot of things that have been like
and almost everything they've turned into a negative to make us hate our culture. This is why we can't solve problems. How did the church get how did the church in the Americas, how did the church get most of their wealth? By accusing Aboriginal women of being witches, drowning them or torturing them, stealing their estate and splitting it between the church and the state. Now that's historical fact. Now our people saying, yeah, they killed that witch. Well, they don't want because they don't want women to be wise.
That's right.
They don't want women to know the earth anymore.
Right.
Yeah, because we're pagans. Yeah, we're the people of the earth. That's what pagan means. It's not a negative. They even made that a negative, didn't they? Made you hate yourself, made you hate your culture, and now you can't fix nothing, and condemning your own stuff and not examining that they are using dark magic and charging you with the results of it. But you the one that catch all the hell. This is like really. The same way the people think that hell's a place to go, don't even know hell is the executor's chamber of the church for those who didn't pay their tithe. And they put you in the dungeon. Go to your law book and you'll find that out. Why don't your preachers tell you all that?
Because that's not what we're taught to tell people.
Of course they're not, because it's too much like the truth. Because they've been a part of the hypocrisy to their own benefit. So who's wealthy?
There's so many things that we don't know, though. And I just want to, if I could
disgusting.
interject, I was listening to Professor Smalls today, and others talking. But the interesting thing, the thing I found also with regard to the Bible, having with a doctorate degree and all this, when we're taught dogmatically, you don't see the truth and the reality that's straight and plain. But he said something that I've used myself, is that if you don't understand things like Hebrew manners and customs, you can read the scripture and have a totally different perspective of when you know what the customs are. And for example, he was using the example of the fact that in Hebrew customs, the groom always brings the wine to the wedding.
Yes.
And when you talk about the story of the wedding, remember the parable of the wedding that Jesus is telling, he's really talking about his own marriage to Mary Magdalene, although the church.
And she rides a donkey because the wife's in the ceremonies, and this has always been African Berber ceremony.
Right, these cultural things.
Where her feet wouldn't touch the ground. She'd be in a tent, and she wears a veil, and they would put her on a donkey, and she would go to the ceremonial point and not touch the ground. And they make all this stuff be totally different stuff than what it actually is.
Well, they totally have him not even getting married because you had the Catholic Church not against women and so much that homosexuality.
They're against the matriarchy.
Right.
It is to destroy the culture. It's an attack on the culture. And then stealing the culture book and then turning it into something that is not.
Right.
That's why people don't properly understand the Bible. Now, the deal of it is just like Brother Small says. And I would put it this way. See, I think a lot of times when they discuss these things, they're being modest because they don't want to offend people. But people have been killing us.
True.
And we're trying to not tell the truth because everybody's offended if you tell the truth bluntly. Meanwhile, they're killing your babies. They're breaking up your families. They're murdering your men and women on the street, unarmed. And you're talking about, well, we don't want to be radical and just say things like they are. So we want to modify and say, and we want to say it not offending people.
And many people are just trapped, if you will, in the church based on the dogmata that has been taught. And that's why they don't know who they are. Well, that's why they're not claiming their nationality.
Let's put it this way.
Right.
If we say to the average person that's been to church, right, going to church, ask them what the word church means. They're going to tell you congregation and everything else. And that's not what the word church means.
Right. Sir.
Church in its original Coptic format, church is the symbol of the cross with a circle around it, which means two things. It means the womb, in actuality, and it also means the cosmos.
Right.
The four gates of the cosmos. And it also means the good being, or swastika, or you see the four gates that are formulated as the earth rotates in view of the Big Dipper, etc. And in its four positions of the seasons make swastika, where you get the term, ancient term, the good being, which the term supreme being is derived, which is cosmological recognition and customs and symbolism, and it's all African, Saba culture, Berber linguistic group, all the African groups, that is the culture. The swastikas here and there and all over the planet. And even when you would have our matrimony ceremonies, marriage is modern contemporary, which is more of a spell cast. It's actually matrimony. Matrimony, the women would put the good being in their hand, the palm of their hand, that's the swastika, and that is their generation and regeneration of life. That is the cycles of the earth, is also Yahweh, or what you would call the four elements, which is the four gates of the four seasons, etc. It is cosmology. That is the culture all over the planet, and you've been lied to and you've been played. Now, so Brother Smalls and others who are saying it with another way of saying it, to be even more succinct to the truth, is that if you don't know Saba, culture, you don't know that Bible. And if you don't know that church means the circle of the womb and the circle of the heavens and the cycle of timekeeping, the chronology of how we keep time, chronology. That's what that really means. And it's a tool for measuring the heavens, not something to be worshipped. And if now they know that, but if they told you that, then they would send you back to the Sabbath culture, and all of these institutions that you've been calling houses of worship would collapse.
Yeah. Now, we're talking about unity and we're talking about getting together.
Unity is understanding.
But,
It's like this.
We have to I have to say this.
Go
We
ahead.
literally have brethren, if you will, on the chat cussing each other out.
Of course, that's what they keep
So, we're talking about unifying and coming
Well,
together.
we
You
already know
can't come
the deal.
together in a chat. How are you gonna rebuild?
Because this is the deal. This is what's happening. Remember when we say, let's put it this way. For those of you who write this down, this will give you a key to what I'm trying to present to you. Is knowing who's who. Now, how many of you are familiar with Hermes Trismegistus? And you are, and I would say to you, most of them are not, right?
Right.
But then you would see many of the people that say Thoth for Egypt, and they'd say Tahuti and Dawuti and deity.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They're all the same. And all one and the same. Now, when they say hermeneutics, yeah. So you read that. It's Hermes law, which is the Asiatic African Gnostic culture, right? Mm-hmm. Saba, the Sabian Moors, etc., right? Mm-hmm. Neuter or new means to neutralize. Mm-hmm. So hermeneutics is really what they do in training people with that book. To neutralize the hermetic origin of it all.
Right.
They even tell you what they're doing in the word. Mm-hmm. And so they're trained deliberately to teach the books from a dogmatic position, thinking that they're being correct, when they're actually burying the hermetic origin of the whole thing, which is burying Saba, while claiming to keep the Saba, when they're actually lying. So this is where Smalls is talking about, without knowing he'd be better to say the Sabian origin rather than the Hebrew, because that's only a linguistic group, right. Not a people.
Right.
That's also a mistake. That's a linguistic
when I was
group.
in college, the course was called Hebrew Manners and Customs, but I get it that even that was
it's a cover up because it's a linguistic group. It's not a people.
Right.
The people are collectively Saba.
Because Hebrew is an action. It's a
verb.
Yes. Crossing.
Yes, crossing over the river. Those. Yeah. Now, but this is the point that I'm making to you. The people must know, if you study Saba or the Sabian culture, the Gnostic Hermetic culture, you've got the whole ball of wax. And all of the versions of it, which would also include Islam, in the concepts that they've been presented in the contemporary world, the corruption side of them all will collapse. Are we clear? And there comes the unity. See, the unity is to remove the lies that have been covering up the truth of the customs and the culture. This is why you will see people here are never taught linguistic form. They're never taught etymology so that they can't research. They're never taught epistemology. They're never taught orthology. They're never taught the morphology of words from one linguistic group to another. And so what happens is that allowed the social engineers to interject connotative linguistic to control the narrative, which is exactly what has been going on. And the people have been taught to hate their own culture while trying to be cultural. It's a contradiction.
You're right. You're right.
And again, and this is why every once in a while you'll see, I'll tell, if you want to help some people, to help them along into kind of looking into the real culture. Everybody should have, with their Bibles and their Qurans, they should have a Kabbalion.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vedas, you know, the 4 Vedas. Now, the one that they call Isa, the one they call Jesus, you know, which you already know, we can get into Serapis and the whole game that they played.
Right.
However, what it's dealing with is a culture, Ionic culture, right? And so when you talk about Ionia, now you talk about North Africa and the peninsula. You see what I'm saying? Then now that they call Portugal, Spain, and Italy today. Now you're still talking Moorish history. Then you're also talking about them killing off the Moors and running them off the land. And then claiming the estate. This is your hybrid. That's why lately I've been saying hybrid Europeans to distinguish the Paleolith from the original Europeans, which are actually Africans.
Mm-hmm. That's why you always see in their crests
all the Moors, because those are the people.
They're like, oh, they put their slaves on there. No, that's the royalty.
They are the real people.
The real royal people.
They're the real people of the land.
Yeah.
And so now you look at the karmic responses and the knowledge of cause and effect, Hermetic law. Now you understand why the Anunnaki taught the European government to civilize them.
But you know what else I noticed? What happens in other countries, so-called countries, there, when you see people of obvious different, what we would consider here, different races, although it's not a race thing, but we would say they were different, they get along and they don't have, like I said, because it doesn't exist what they have just established.
Because race
here,
is a paradigm
right, of the U.S. and they don't have that.
Linnaeus.
Yeah, they don't have it over
because they know that we have multiple tribes come from Africa, and that the Moabite women have created a whole gene pool of human.
And I had a Jamaican friend who went to school in England, and he was telling me that he said, look up, and I forgot now the name of this ship, the situation, but you probably know there was a period of time when Europe and England asked for, they were rebuilding, and they had all of these Jamaican, most of them, a lot of them were children, come over on this ship, and it's an area and it's a name, who came over to rebuild.
Because they're Phoenicians.
Yeah, they came there. They put out we need help to build. Yeah.
Let's clear this up.
Yeah.
They called on the Phoenicians to build.
Yeah.
I.e. the Moors.
Right.
So now you say Jamaica, and they're looking at a modern name, a contemporary name under the crown.
Well, this was like, because this was in the
look at the psychology.
Was it like the 50s, 60s?
Yeah, but I'm saying, look at this. Look at the psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying Phoenicians and Moors, they bring Jamaicans.
Jamaicans, yeah, because they came from the island. Yeah.
You see. Hold on. So they're looking at a name that's no more than 200 years old. If it's 125, you're lucky. Do the research. Because we are the builders. We are the master builders. Always have been. All they're doing is going back home to a part of land that they ceded to rebuild. Because they built it in the first place. Stop.
Windbush, that's it. Somebody put it. It was called the Windrush or Windbush. I think that was the Windbush. It was the name of the ship. It was a ship called Windbush that took all of these, of our people.
Now, isn't it interesting? And this is not new, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they would not allow them to stabilize and build on the islands.
No, but they had
anything, limited. They were limited.
Right.
Why? Because they're under control of the crown, of the Circle Church and the Chancery. And they think the crown means just the Queen of England. No, it means the Bar Association of Foot Soldiers of Unum Sanctum. The people you call lawyers and attorneys are the crown.
over here. Here's a question. Amore Ali Gambo L, aka Poseidon says, so you subscribe to the out of Africa theory, question mark, as Lemurians and Atlanteans, weren't we all over
All
the
of that's
planet?
us too.
And why is the mounds and pyramids
All that's our stuff too. You
older
know it
over
is.
here?
You know it is.
I know, but I'm just putting the question.
They
out.
know it is too. The deal of it is our people at large need to know that so that we can mentally become reattached to our land and stop alienating ourselves from our own estates.
Right.
Just because we've been taught that.
Let me go back here. I was just checking. Okay. Just to see if there are any other questions. But anyway, we are at the 3 hour and 5 minute mark.
Yeah.
So technically, we have reached the hour of our time of our
Let's
ending.
write this down so we don't forget it. And I'm going to make this a note. We're going to talk about the Special Committee of 24, decolonization.
So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. We thank you for all your comments and your questions, everything that you
keep this up here so we don't forget. And that's going to be, we're going to go into that. Basically, when we converse on these different subjects, our intended goal is actually to start bringing remedy and not just to play victim, these victim games which have become the norm with no cures. And we need to be discussing those things like reversion of a state, right of claim, adverse claim, and decolonization. Altogether, those all would come under nationalization. That's a fact. And because what I'm recognizing as we're talking to different people and different people are learning about nationalization, that they don't know that these subcategory issues come under nationalization. They look at nationalization very often as correcting your name, not changing your name, you're correcting your name. When you change something, you're going to something that may or may not be foreign or something that may be outside of origin of self. Nationalization is reclaiming those attributes that already belong to you, that were taken from you or from via unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery operations of hybrid European colonization of your land, etc. So nationalization in its nature, political nature, includes decolonization. And what I recognize is that people will talk about nationalization and then don't talk about decolonization. They go together. Mm-hmm. It's called cleaning your house. So you don't nationalize and then not fix the problem that caused the problem in the first place. Like when you see a nation nationalized, as an example, Cuba, with Fidel Castro nationalizing Cuba, Adolf Hitler nationalizing Germany. You see they purged Germany of people who were raping Germany, and but they weren't Germans, but they were raping Germany. See, nobody talks about that when they talk about Hitler. They just talk about he's a terrible guy, etc. They don't talk about what was really behind it, that persons who were claimed to be Jews were actually raping economically Germany and actually undermining his government. And the fact of the matter is, many Germans were helping some of these people that were called Jews, and they actually stabbed them in the back. So it's a lot of that history that's really not even being told. But essentially, nationality and nationalization on a political realm is when your house is messed up and your mom tells all your neighbors' kids who's tearing the house up to go home to their mother. That's nationalization on a political realm. And it shouldn't be that hard for people to understand it. We need to fix our house. Well, anyway, I said grand evening to you all.
Yes, we want to thank everyone. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please make sure you patronize and check out our sponsors as you see them rolling under the on the banners. Please visit their sites. Please tune in on Tuesday nights to Office Hours with Dr. G. Tuesdays 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Please tune in to Sister Tamara L's on Facebook on Thursday nights.
Yeah.
Please make sure you support those that support us, and we appreciate you. And of course, those of you who support the House of Reawakening Minds, we greatly appreciate it, because even though we are not doing any in-person classes, we do still have the expenses of running that building, and in addition to the fact that it's being repaired by United Republic, the House of Reawakening Minds has its own expenditures, and we do appreciate your support. There are those of you who do support us regularly. Even $1 is on note, if you will, is something that we treasure. So we appreciate your support of what we do here, and it also helps us to be able to say thank you to Grand Sheik and Brother Abdul and Brother Shem, who are regular teachers, and we do appreciate you. So thank you so much, so very, 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 very much for tuning in. And until next time, check in with me, I guess, on Tuesday night for Office Hours with Dr. G, when I will be back. And
I want to also, because I got a lot of other good support information, that we're going to go into. Some of it we didn't have time to go into, but TT, we're going to give you a shout out.
She's on.
We're going to give you a shout out, and we appreciate you caring and doing all that you can in the background to share information, and also to encourage people. Y'all can go on her site too, TT Asha, and check out a lot of older literature, because she's an anthropologist and she's a researcher, and she has a lot of old books, and this is where you get your knowledge. And many of you need to learn to read some of the first transliterations of a lot of the old literature, because it'll be translated into Old English, and you'll see a lot of area where they reconstruct things to actually spook you out. So check her out, and she has a lot to share, a very lot to share, and I want her to know that she's appreciated. So I shout out to you, sis.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.